Chapter 1106. Killing Dark Ancestor Xie Sanxiao was a big deal. In a short period of time, an ordinary cultivator had become a hero revered by the world, and it would be very difficult for ordinary people to withstand the various halos and sugar-coated bullets that followed. But in the end, Zhuo Butong chose to calm down. He was well aware of the principle that an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth, and also understood the danger of a tall tree attracting the wind. Choosing to hide his achievements and fame wasn't just for his own safety and that of his descendants, but also for the future of the entire Zhuo family. If he accepted this lucky break setting and obtained a great glory that didn't belong to him for no reason, even if he could withstand the temptation of glory, it would be hard to guarantee that the rest of the Zhuo family's descendants wouldn't become arrogant in the future. It was easy for people to make mistakes when they were too arrogant. Many successful people were bound to experience all kinds of hardships and experiences before reaching the top. If they took a leap, they would be the ones who fell in the end. What Zhuo Butong feared was that he and his descendants would be affected by all kinds of halos and lose the will to strive forward. Thus, Zhuo Butong chose to hide. He abandoned everything and even changed his family name. All his friends and relatives who knew about this back then had their memories of this glory erased by Zhuo Butong and Huaxiu alliance during a secret trip. Even Zhuo Butong himself had been erased. When Zhuo Butong woke up again, he had changed his appearance and even changed his name to Zhuotong. That hero Zhuo Butong became a memory shared by Zhuotong and everyone else, and became a legendary hero of Huaxiu Nation. Every year, when Zhuotong visited the Cemetery of Martyrs on behalf of his organization, he would always feel a sense of déjà vu when he saw Zhuo Butong's face. Of course, this was all in the past. So in some sense, Whitehair felt that this Zhuo Butong was also an extraordinary person. Although his realm wasn't high, he had a long-term vision. But even Zhuo Butong himself couldn't have imagined that his skill at picking up scraps would be completely inherited by his descendants, especially by a person called Audiobook. But unlike Zhuo Butong, Audiobook was still striving to improve himself. This was because he had always been well aware that what he had obtained didn't truly belong to him. He needed to work harder and use his own efforts to prove that he was worthy of it all. After Whitehair finished explaining the basic situation, King of Nightmares was shocked. He had not completely digested the history of that year. "Don't worry, my lord. I'm aware of the situation. I'll immediately head to the residence of reincarnation." Of course, this information couldn't be obtained through normal channels, but Whitehair had his own unique means. He had originally calculated the time, and planned to take advantage of Wang Nuan's birth to come to this world, and then use the power of Shadow Dao to directly open the valve to the main vein of Nine Dragon Mountain. Unfortunately, Wang Ling's vigilance had exceeded his expectations. He didn't have much time left, and didn't have the time to continue tangling with Wang Ling. Now he could only carry out his second plan as a last resort. Whether it was Nightmare, Xiaoming or that dark ancestor Xie Sanxiao whom he was about to resurrect. In the end, they were just his tools. The prison of reincarnation was also called the residence of reincarnation. It was the largest underground prison in Huaxiu Nation's Jinghua City, and also the main prison for all serious criminals. Originally, the old devil, master of Immortal Mansion Chengyu and evil sword god would have been escorted here, but General Bai, the head of the 10 generals, had made them stay behind and form a 3-man prison mahjong squad to atone for their crimes by working together to carry out missions. Because of this, the transfer of these 3 people to the prison had been suspended. The prisoners in the residence of reincarnation had committed truly heinous crimes. Actually, in comparison, whether it was the old devil, Chengyu or evil sword god, none of them had committed such heinous crimes. Back then, the old devil had simply been blinded by love, and had broken into the national palace in search of the Wheel of Time in an attempt to continue his former fate. He had caused a huge ruckus, and a lot of people had spread false rumors behind his back. But in reality, it wasn't as terrifying as the rumors made it out to be. This was a crime of illegal invasion. Master of Immortal Mansion Chengyu's Immortal Mansion was an unauthorized dark force. He had obtained Immortal Shi Pai's magic array, and had planned to create trouble after he refined a peerless godly sword. But he had stolen Jinka. Before he could do anything, the entire organization had been wiped out. It was like a company that had just been set up and was ready to start operating, but the Industry and Commerce Bureau suddenly dropped by to take the boss away on the grounds that he was operating illegally. As for Evil Sword God, there was naturally no need to mention him. In order to surpass his Shifu, he had cultivated an evil art, which had led to a heart demon in his body. To put it bluntly, he was a psychopath with schizophrenia. As everyone knew, psychopaths weren't illegal. Of course, there seemed to be a reasonable explanation for these three people's actions, but the fact was that they had still caused a very bad impact. It was only natural that they would be sentenced to 1,000 years to atone for their crimes. Furthermore, General Bai's condition was that this 1,000-year atonement could only be offset with merit points, and couldn't be waived according to the normal procedure. That was to say, if they didn't have a mission to carry out, they would have to wait for it, until their time was up. It looked very miserable, but at least in Songhai First Prison, Warden Liang treated the three of them pretty well, and would occasionally play mahjong with them. Compared with the truly vicious criminals in the Residence of Reincarnation, they weren't treated as well there. Even for Nightmare, this was his first time in the Residence of Reincarnation. After White Hair resurrected him, just like Bai Yuquan, Nightmare had also received some power of Fate Dao, which made him even stronger than before he had died. Nightmare couldn't imagine how terrifying Dark Ancestor would be if he was resurrected. As he snuck in, the five of them discovered his tracks. Nightmare cultivated an extremely special technique. He cultivated his physical body into a virtual body, which was the highest realm of the nightmare art. The 8th floor of the underground prison actually wasn't a place where criminals were held. The Residence of Reincarnation divided criminals into 7 levels, and the lower the level, the higher the level of imprisonment. On the 8th floor was an exhibition hall. Inside the hall were the relics of some beyond S-class wanted criminals. When these criminals were discovered, they were almost always executed on the spot by Huaxio's Immortal Arts Mobile Unit, or the Allied Army's Peacekeeping Unit. The relics on display here were firstly to warn these criminals of how dangerous they were, and secondly to show how difficult it was for law enforcement officers to arrest criminals and crack down on crime. And Dark Ancestor Xie Sanqiao's skull, which White Hair had mentioned before, was in this 8th zone. Apart from Xie Sanqiao's skull, Nightmare also found a lot of interesting things as he searched. Chapter 1107. As the Dark Ancestor, Xie Sanqiao had long been a world-shocking figure. To be able to be displayed together with the legendary Dark Ancestor's skull as a related relic, none of these criminals were to be trifled with. On the way, Nightmare saw many criminals who had extremely high bounties from the Heavenly Dao, and were wanted globally by the Alliance. These people hadn't been caught before Nightmare died, but he didn't expect that they would become exhibits here in the span of a few hundred years. For example, the broken dark gold armor that Nightmare saw when he entered the door hadn't been completely cleaned of blood. Instead, it had long since dried up and was firmly attached to the armor. If Nightmare remembered correctly, the owner of this dark gold armor was Kaiser Maud, also known as the Golden Tank, a cultivator from the West. Back then, Kaiser's dark gold armor was the symbol of his identity. But what was truly solid wasn't his armor, but his body. Nightmare couldn't imagine that Kaiser Maud, who was known as the Golden Tank, back then and had a sage body and the strongest body, was actually gone. From the marks on the armor, someone must have punched through Kaiser's abdomen, but who did it? It was hard to imagine that there was actually a man in this world who could break the Golden Tank's body. As he walked, Nightmare found the relic of a second old friend. It was a broken jade bead. If Nightmare's guess was right, this should be the inner core of the 6th-level Demon King, Kuei Wolf, who had fled to the human world from the gate between worlds and committed crimes everywhere. Nightmare didn't expect that even Kuei Wolf would be caught. Back then, because Kuei Wolf knew how to transform into a human, he did very well in the human world. He had even acted in several movies about the werewolf race, and became a famous celebrity idol. He had even won the Golden Wolf Best Actor award several times. Logically speaking, as long as Kuei Wolf continued to disguise himself, no one should be able to guess his true identity. But why? Even Kuei Wolf had been discovered? Nightmare was puzzled and puzzled. He looked at the many relics displayed here. Most of them actually belonged to his old friends. For a moment, Nightmare actually felt the hypocrisy of the world. It wasn't easy to be a bad guy these days. It was too difficult for him. But in reality, when Nightmare thought about it carefully, he realized that he hadn't done too many evil things to climb to the top of the dark web. Whether it was Caesar or Kuei Lang, both of them were ranked in the dark web back then. Nightmare Lord himself wasn't even on the list yet. Then, how did he reach the top? Nightmare remembered that Kuei Wolf seemed to have found him first. At that time, his relationship with Kuei Wolf was as shallow as water, and they were merely drinking buddies. Chief Wolf came to him and told him that someone was willing to pay a high price for him to use nightmare art to send a person to a mental hospital. Nightmare remembered that he did not agree at first because he did not want to do anything illegal. After some investigation, he found out that the person Chief Wolf wanted him to deal with was actually a serial murderer who had been on the run for many years. Incubus thought about the high bounty and finally accepted the mission. But if there was one, there would be two more, and more people found the King of Nightmares through Kuei Lang's client. As for the King of Nightmares, more and more people were sent to the mental hospital. After a long time, Nightmare found out one day that he was wanted, and that he had appeared in the dark web's first position. He remembered that during the period when he reached the top, he kept having recurring nightmares. He was on the run from the Alliance and finally died at the hands of an old Taoist. And after he died, that murderer, who was the first to be sent to the mental hospital by him, was the Baldy who was now known as Ultimate King of Killers. Not only did he manage to escape from prison, but he also rose to the top of the dark web in one fell swoop. What Nightmare found out later was that Caesar was still alive at that time. There were also records of him fighting Ultimate King of Killers, who was the strongest in the dark web at that time. According to the records, the match between the two was a draw. Then, who was the one who had punched Caesar's abdomen? Such a large and thick hole had been punched through with a single punch. How terrifying was the other party's strength? This was one of the unsolved mysteries of Nightmare's exploration of the residence of reincarnation. Who had punched Caesar? Finally, in the innermost part of the residence of reincarnation, in a completely sealed glass cabinet, Nightmare finally saw Dark Ancestor's skull, the symbol of endless evil. Even though it had already been burnt to the point where only this piece was left, the miraculous power that this half of the skull exuded made Nightmare feel an indescribable sense of power. He couldn't help but want to kneel down and worship it. Although he was surprised by the cause of Dark Ancestor's death, he was even more surprised by Dark Ancestor's crazy idea of absorbing the main vein back then. There were only over 1,000 heaven veins on Earth, and there was only one main vein. After absorbing the main vein, the tremendous energy of the other 1,000 underground spirit veins would be absorbed. Back then, Dark Ancestor had clearly underestimated this energy. This was the spiritual energy of an entire planet. If he absorbed it all into his body, if his body couldn't handle it, he would definitely suffer a backlash. Dark Ancestor, this junior has offended you. The shapeshifter's heart was filled with respect. It reached out its hand and silently snuck into the glass case to take the skull away. He was already a dead man. His life had been given to him for nothing. For Nightmare, he already had no way out. The future development of this world had nothing to do with him. Even if it was destroyed. Nightmare snuck in quietly until the next day, November 8th, Saturday morning. It was only then that the staff responsible for taking inventory of the items on display realized that Dark Ancestor's skull had disappeared. This incident caused a huge stir in the residence of reincarnation, and Huaxiu Alliance hurriedly called for an emergency meeting. Have we already ruled out internal personnel? Wisdom Saint President Qi was still in charge of the meeting. The disappearance of Dark Ancestor's skull was a serious matter. This was the #1 wanted criminal by the International Alliance of Cultivators back then. Even though he was already dead, the power of this skull still couldn't be underestimated. If it was used to commit evil deeds, the prison of reincarnation would lose all standing and reputation. Everyone has an alibi, and the possibility of using magic to commit the crime has been ruled out. There were no spirit power fluctuations detected at the scene. That is to say, no one has used magic in that area in the past 24 hours, generally said. That is to say, without the help of any magic, the only person who can easily sneak in without being discovered is Speaking up to this point, President Chi glanced at the dark-skinned dark sacred minister Ing next to him. Dark Saint turned pale with fright. F***K. You can't say that I did it just because I'm dark. Chapter 1108. Indeed, after eliminating all possibilities of magic, only spontaneous abilities could accomplish such a difficult theft. There were in fact two kinds of spontaneous abilities. One evolved from the spirit root, which in addition to the 5 elements, actually had a small chance of awakening other special attributes, which were often accompanied by special abilities. For example, they could attract metal with magnetism, or they could control their own or other people's fats, or some people were born with the ability to become invisible. These were all spontaneous abilities brought about by special spirit roots. Although it was only a small probability, given the global population, there were in fact a lot of people with special spirit roots. In fact, Dark Saint was a cultivator with a special ability. His spirit root had a camouflage effect, which allowed him to remain completely invisible in the shadows. Thus, if he moved around in a dark and claustrophobic space, Dark Saint could move as if there was no one around. I think of someone who has the same ability as Dark Saint, and could even be said to be even more troublesome, President Chi said again. It was clear that at this critical juncture, he wasn't going to joke around with his colleague next to him anymore. Old Chi, you mean? Battle Saint Marshal Jiang thought of someone. Nightmare, President Chi said. This is the #1 person of the Dark Network whom you personally dealt with 300 years ago. He can't still be alive. Marshal Jiang instantly stood up with a solemn expression. I personally killed him 300 years ago. I only used telepathic finger to end his life the moment he revealed his true form. There's no way he's still alive. Old Jiang, sit down. President Chi said calmly. We also received news of Baijia's death before. But now, Baijia has reappeared, and even his son, Bai Yuquan, who died young, has miraculously reappeared and fallen into the net of the law. Thus, nothing in this world is absolute. There were too many ways of resurrection among the forbidden secret techniques to count. Although the chances of success are very low, it's not impossible. Crap. At that moment, Marshal Zhang's expression brightened. According to your theory, Old Chi, could it be that they stole Xie Sanxiao's skull for? If that's the case, then we have to prepare for the worst, President Chi sighed. Back then, Dark Ancestor Xie Sanxiao had been so powerful that no one could match him. It was precisely because of this that this Dark Ancestor was conceited, believing that he could absorb the entire Earth's underground spirit veins. However, the truth was that Xie Sanxiao had overestimated his own abilities. He was the strongest man who had died because of his own pride. He had not been killed by anyone, and no one could kill him. It was the same back then. Now it was the same. If the other party had really stolen Xie Sanxiao's skull to revive him, in that case, there would soon be a reign of terror in the cultivation world. The cause of Xie Sanxiao's death was publicly acknowledged to be at the hands of the hero, Zhuo Butong. If the prideful Xie Sanxiao were to learn of this after his resurrection, given Dark Ancestor's previous personality, he would probably immediately start a massacre. There's going to be a fierce battle. The 10 generals sat around the round table in the conference room. They narrowed their eyes and their emotions were complicated. Most importantly, they had yet to figure out the objective of the person behind the scenes. That morning, it was still a warm and sunny day, a day of world peace. Teacher Pan used the class group to hold an impromptu class meeting. Specifically, it had to do with the upgraded competition format of the body technique exchange meet this time. Teacher Pan, who was actually a great beauty. Students, I've just received notice from the Alliance of 100 Schools that the body technique exchange meet this time has been upgraded from a district-level competition to a national competition. I hope everyone will work hard during this period of time. Students who are participating in the competition should work hard. Students who aren't participating should also cheer for those who are. At all members, Sports Committee member Super Chin. How did it become a national competition? Why is there such a big jump? Ideology Hero Gua. My God, a national competition. How many schools will be participating? Will our school still be able to get a ranking? Because there are many cultivation schools holding similar exchange events at the same time, the Alliance of 10,000 Schools has decided to plan a large-scale event. Teacher Pan, who is actually a great beauty. Everyone, don't be too pessimistic. Our school's overall fighting strength is actually pretty good. Because of the upgraded competition format, the competition will be delayed for 3 days according to the original schedule, which is to officially take place next Friday, November 14th. Report to the designated location, 9 Dragon Mountain on Thursday night. Students participating in the competition will have to take an immortal boat. The competition will last for 8 days in total. 9 Dragon Mountain? Many people found this location a little familiar. Ideology Hirogwa. I remember this is 9 Dragon Mountain. Isn't there a big shot who died here? It's Dark Ancestor Xie Sanxiao. Teacher Pan, who is actually a great beauty. Student Gua knows a lot. Back then, this legendary number 1 figure of the Dark Network, Xie Sanxiao, met his demise on 9 Dragon Mountain. Furthermore, it was our nation's heroes Hua Butong who personally led a team to kill him. Thus 9 Dragon Mountain also has a very special meaning. This body technique exchange meet is being held here to commemorate these war heroes who realized their values and beliefs in battle. I hope all students will study hard. Class Monitor, Lotus Sun. Then Teacher Pan, apart from the scale of the national competition, are there any other changes? Teacher Pan, who was actually a great beauty. Originally, the district competition had 5 main participants and 5 substitutes. Now that the competition format has been upgraded, it's now a 10-person team. All 10 of them will be the main force. Wang Ling was stunned on the spot when he saw this message through the screen. 10 main force. Even if he didn't do anything, with Lu Qingyi, Wang Zhun, Gu Xuanji and that bunch around, what the hell could the other schools do? Teacher, I know that time is tight, but all the schools are preparing. This time, a total of 102 Cultivation high schools will be heading to 9 Dragon Mountain from all over the country. Each school will send 10 people to form a team to directly fight a 100-team battle on 9 Dragon Mountain. The team with the highest number of points will be the winner. Teacher Pan said in the group, I know that time is tight for all of you, so next week, Headmaster Chen will personally give you supplementary lessons and conduct physical training, as well as disseminate knowledge about spirit plants on 9 Dragon Mountain. 9 Dragon Mountain is lush with spirit plants, and for the 8-day team battle, everyone needs to be able to survive in the wild. It wouldn't be good if you accidentally ate spirit plants or fruits that you shouldn't. Looks like we're going to be busy. Hirogwa sighed. The next moment, Teacher Pan said in the group, students participating in the competition, you don't have to do your homework first. Everyone. Chapter 1109. It was Monday, November 10th. The special training which Teacher Pan had previously announced officially began. Number 60 High School had set up a temporary special training class during the special training period, and all the participating students were in class together. Wang Ling, Lotus Sun, Xiaming. They were all here. Xiaming actually felt a little embarrassed. But Wang Ling didn't seem to care. Suddenly he felt that compared with Wang Ling, he had truly lost completely. Looking at Wang Ling's expressionless face as usual, and the way he sat by the window like an old man who looked at everything with a carefree attitude, he felt aggrieved. How could this person be so calm? Was this person really just a high school student going through puberty? The special training this time was mainly focused on the following 3 aspects. 1. Understanding of spirit plants. Teacher Pan had already explained the specific reason very clearly in the group before. There were tens of thousands of spirit plants on 9 Dragon Mountain, and most of them were inedible. Some of them would be fine after eating them, but if you didn't digest them right away and immediately ate another one, there was a high chance that you would get food poisoning. Although Wang Ling didn't think there was a spirit plant that could poison him to death too. Understanding of the opponents. After the competition at the district level, the number of enemies that number 60 high school had to deal with instantly increased from less than 10 to a total of 101. Each cultivation high school had a different background and focus on teaching. Thus, it was very important to have a general understanding of these opponent schools. Know thyself, know thy enemy, and you will emerge victorious in every battle. Of course, because of the time limit, Headmaster Chen would only highlight some of the key schools. As for the other high schools that he felt were about the same level as number 60 high school in terms of combat strength, he would organize them into documents for the participating students to memorize. Thus, at the beginning of the day, Wang Ling saw thick stacks of documents on everyone's desks. With a single scan of the king's eye, Wang Ling instantly memorized all the information on the high schools. There was nothing special to pay attention to. It was fine as long as he was careful not to kill someone. If he really did kill someone by accident, although he could bring them back to life, the problem was that the psychological trauma would last a lifetime. Even if the memory was erased, there were still times when the mind would have a subconscious reaction. It was like why many people were afraid of heights. Maybe it was because they had accidentally fallen from a high place before, and their memories had disappeared. Apart from the above 2 points, there was also the third point, which was the special physical training. It was obviously unrealistic to want to quickly improve his physical skills in a few days. Thus, Wang Ling guessed that Headmaster Chen would probably share some technical knowledge with him. It was very common in body techniques to move 1,000 caddies with little effort. If you kept your mind on high alert during the 8-day team battle, you definitely wouldn't be able to last until the end, and would eventually be eliminated. Dear students, this battle is of utmost importance. You will compete with the students from the other 101 cultivation colleges in the area designated by 9 Dragon Mountain to determine the final winner. In 8 days, this will be a protracted war, so we must first formulate a good strategy. On the podium, Headmaster Chen began to teach everyone. This time is different from the previous military training of the 6 schools. The military training of the 6 schools is a joint drill. Both the terrain and the environment have been artificially modified. It looks dangerous, but in fact, it has been treated for safety. But in this activity on 9 Dragon Mountain, accidents can happen at any time. Everyone will be fighting in the jungles of 9 Dragon Mountain, so you have to assign your own tasks in advance to maintain unity in the team. If someone gets lost and there are not enough people, there's a high chance that they will be swallowed up by students from other schools. Speaking up to this point, Headmaster Chen took out an iron chopstick. This is a piece of black iron. Then he handed it to Gu Xuanji. Student Gu, try breaking the chopstick. Crack. With a crisp sound, the chopstick was broken in half. Gu Xuanji did as he was told. Breaking chopsticks was a standard experiment to illustrate the importance of team unity. Actually, a lot of people had already noticed it by now. Sure enough, Headmaster Chen took out another 10 chopsticks. Student Gu, try breaking them again. Crack. Gu Xuanji continued to break them effortlessly. Headmaster Chen. Then Headmaster Chen took out the rest of the chopsticks. Student Gu, try again. Crack. Once again, Gu Xuanji showed no mercy. Everyone. Headmaster Chen. Come students, let's move on to the next topic. Everyone. Unity. This was a key phrase that Headmaster Chen mentioned at the beginning of the lesson. The 100-team battle was a team battle. Furthermore, it was a point system this time, and team points were calculated. All schools had to ensure that as many students as possible in their team survived to the end. Only in this way could they accumulate more points. This was because the way to accumulate points was the same, which Headmaster Chen would mention later. In a situation where everyone had the same way of obtaining points, if too many people in a school were eliminated, even if those few people were extremely strong individually, the final number of points they could obtain would not be comparable to the strength of many people. Unity was the essence of the 100-team battle this time. Headmaster Chen was still quite worried about number 60 high school's internal affairs. He was worried that something might go wrong between Xia Ming and Wang Ling. Wang Ling wasn't the kind of student who would take the initiative to pick a fight, but Xia Ming was more impulsive by comparison. Headmaster Chen had to think of a way to resolve this before the competition began. At the very least, he had to let Xia Ming and Wang Ling shake hands to show their friendship. Now let me introduce you to the cultivation high schools that are relatively strong in the 100-team battle this time. If you run into students from these schools and you don't have full confidence in winning, please consider your school's honor and avoid fighting as much as possible. Make sure that you can survive. Headmaster Chen said. They're that strong? Although Hirogwa had long since learned from his uncle that there were indeed a lot of strong high school students among the schools participating in the competition this time, he hadn't expected that their number 60 high school would have to submit to those people when they went out. They didn't even have the qualifications to fight, and could only run away. First of all, number 1 Devil Subduing High School from Jinghua City. Headmaster Chen turned the magic ball in his hand, and an image was instantly projected in the air. It was a picture of number 1 Devil Subduing High School students, who were wearing black and white sports uniforms. The color of their uniforms was very gloomy, and it was obvious at first glance that they weren't people to be trifled with. It was the third quarter. Even if he had to hold back his tears, he had to finish writing the flag. Chapter 11:10. Number 1 Devil Subduing High School. While flipping through the handouts they had prepared in advance, they stared at Headmaster Chen as he talked about the history of number 1 Devil Subduing High. Number 1 Devil Subduing High had been established for less than 600 years, but it was a cultivation school invested in by the Devil Subduing sect, an orthodox light faction. Over the past 600 years, it had made important contributions to the nation's work of eliminating demons and protecting justice, as well as the cultivation of talents for the Immortal Arts Mobile Squad. As the sect leader of the Devil Subduing sect and the current headmaster of number 1 Devil Subduing High, Li Qingxi, who was nicknamed Devil Subduing Taoist, had long since made a name for himself. The specialty of number 1 Devil Subduing High was the study of control, and the students who studied there were naturally well-versed in the Taoist arts and essences of all kinds of control spells. Thus, number 1 Devil Subduing High was extremely dangerous, and Headmaster Chen directly listed it as the number 1 school that needed to be strictly guarded against. Control-type spells were extremely difficult to deal with. Not only could they restrict the casting of spells, but they could also restrict the movement of the body. Soul sealing, petrification, weakening, puppets. There were all sorts of control-type magic. If one wasn't able to properly deal with it, it would instead become the enemy's assistance. Although the main way to obtain points this time was through physical contact, and using physical skills to hit the opponent to obtain points, it was not easy to do so. But in terms of spells, there were no restrictions in the 100-team battle. Apart from the 5 elemental spells that would cause large-scale destruction to the environment, all other spells could be used. What Headmaster Chen was most worried about was number 1 Devil Subduing High using puppet-type spells, forcing the students from the other schools to join their ranks and form a guard to protect them. In this way, they did not need to worry about the problem of guards at all. They only needed to focus on completing the mission and obtain as many points as possible. There were all kinds of puppet-type spells. If number 1 Devil Subduing High played it a little sinisterly, this battlefield would become number 1 Devil Subduing High's home court. One of the most troublesome puppet-type spells is the virus puppet spell. Headmaster Chen made an estimation of the control-type spells that number 1 Devil Subduing High might use in the 100-team battle this time. Virus puppet technique? It's not a real virus, but a type of chain control spell. It was also a classic spell that could control one person when it was cast. After that, anyone or any living being that came into contact with this person would become his puppet. There are many levels to this spell, and you'll have to listen to whoever you touch. It's kind of like developing an offline system, Headmaster Chen said. The worst-case scenario is that some students from the schools might not be able to resist rescuing their teammates. They might act like the Calabash brothers saving their grandfather, and in the end, the entire army will be controlled. Everyone, Headmaster Chen. From my analysis, there's a high probability that the students from number 1 Devil Subduing High will be able to use this spell. To be honest, Headmaster Chen's behavior seemed like he was trying to suppress his score by going through the questions before the exam. However, it might not be accurate, but given the current situation, everyone could only believe in Headmaster Chen's estimation. Headmasters weren't particularly weak. Although Wang Ling had never seen Headmaster Chen display his battle prowess, for Headmaster Chen to be able to become the headmaster of a 1,000-year-old school like number 60 High, it would definitely be difficult for him to assume the mantle without a certain level of strength. The guard at the school gate, Old Man Li, was a retired 7-star Special Forces soldier. He even had the strength of a nascent soul. Vice-Chancellor Chen's ability was definitely not weaker than Old Man Li's. But while half of the people present could only guess at Headmaster Chen's true realm, Wang Ling, Gu Xuanji and the others were well aware of it. Headmaster Chen indeed wasn't weak. He was an itinerant immortal. Compared with Gu Xuanji and the others, he still wasn't enough. But even if Headmaster Chen was just an itinerant immortal, Wang Ling didn't look down on him in the slightest. He was only 16 years old, and Headmaster Chen had seen a lot more than he did in terms of life experience. Furthermore, Headmaster Chen had been a headmaster for so many years and had helped out with the district, city and even national exam papers, so he understood the mentality of the other high schools too well. There was a circle of schools, and the headmasters of these schools naturally had their own circle as well. Therefore, this battle wasn't just a competition between the students. It was also a high-level psychological game between the principals of the various schools. Not only did they have to formulate battle strategies for their own school's students, but they also had to guess the thoughts of the principals of the other schools, and guess the tactics that the principals of the other schools might use. But there were a total of 101 rival schools, and it was clearly unrealistic to analyze all of them, so Headmaster Chen could only pick out the key points. The rest would depend on the luck of the number 60 high team. Sometimes, luck was also a part of strength. In addition to guarding against number 1 Devil Subduing High, you also have to be wary of some school teams forming a temporary alliance in order to survive in the early to middle part of the 8 days. I'm more worried about no. 1 Devil Subduing High and Titan High teaming up, said Headmaster Chen. Titan High? Someone was puzzled. I know that. Super Chen raised his hand. Actually, my first choice for high school was Titan. Unfortunately, I didn't get in because I didn't have enough points. What kind of school is this? Don't tell me they're all. Hirogwa thought of a possibility. That's right, this Titan High lives up to its name. Both boys and girls are tanks. Everyone. Titan High has a ton system, and after entering the school, everyone cultivates the same technique, the Titan art. It's said that it can continuously compress a person's density. The students look normal, but some of them actually weigh over 1,000 jin, or even 10,000 jin. Super Chen said, according to the Titan Arts classification, those weighing over 1,000 jin are trucks, 2,000 jin are tanks, 5,000 jin are battleships, and 10,000 jin and above are aircraft carriers. 10,000 jin. Is that the average Qiao Biluo? Hirogwa was shocked. Student Super Chen is absolutely right. At this moment, Headmaster Chen also voiced his worries. The students of Titan High are all heavyweights. The students participating in the battle this time are all in their first year. The students participating in the battle this time are all grade 1 students, so it's estimated that they're all truck-level students. Of course, there might also be tank-level students among them. These students from Titan High use techniques to compress their weight, thereby making their bodies extremely dense and almost indestructible. At the same time, they're very lethal and destructive. If they fight them head-on, it's nothing more than throwing an egg against a rock. If they join forces with number 1 Devil Subduing High and become meatball tanks for number 1 Devil Subduing High to eliminate the other schools, that would be very scary. Meatball tanks. This is also a type of puppet technique which can be manipulated with special puppet threads. It can turn a human body into a destructive rolling ball. Among all the high schools present, no one is more suitable than Titan High. Chapter 11:11. It could only be said that Headmaster Chen was indeed Headmaster Chen. As a powerhouse who had seen the world, his analysis was as ferocious as a tiger's. Devil Subduing plus Titan teaming up. This was the worst-case scenario that Headmaster Chen could think of. If the students of these two schools teamed up, they would have meat shields, crowd control, and damage output. Then this 100-team battle would lose its meaning. In the end, it would only become the main battlefield for these two schools. Therefore, in order to prevent this situation, which was the situation of the two schools forming an alliance, Headmaster Chen's strategy of giving priority to everyone was to start with the students of Titan High School. An important prerequisite for forming an alliance was that both students had to be on friendly terms. And according to Headmaster Chen's knowledge, There was no previous connection between the Titans and Devil Subduing. However, given Li Qingxi, the current headmaster of Devil Subduing High, he must have already thought of the optimal combination of Devil Subduing and Titan. Headmaster Chen thought that the other party was probably formulating a strategy to form a friendly alliance with Titan High School. Nothing was too deceitful on the battlefield. Perhaps disrupting the situation was somewhat shameless, but this was also a strategist's strategy. In order to prevent the two schools from forming an alliance, Headmaster Chen carefully formulated a plan. Headmaster Chen waved his sleeves and gave everyone a storage pouch. Everyone opened it and was shocked by the contents of the storage bag. Because the storage bag given by Headmaster Chen was actually filled with snacks, and most of them were desserts. Wang Ling instantly understood what the headmaster meant. Students who practice the Titan arts need to gain weight, so their lunch in Titan High School is high-calorie food, burgers, fried food, and all kinds of soft drinks and snacks. Among all these foods, desserts were their favorite. As long as he used the dessert plan, he would definitely be able to take down Titan High. Apart from that, there's also a simple support-type spell in everyone's storage bags. This spell is a secret creation of mine, and I've spent almost all of my life's knowledge on it. Speaking up to this point, Headmaster Chen's eyes reddened, and he was almost moved by himself. Super Chun, Hero Gua, Lotus Sun, Xiaming, as well as Xiaming's classmate Li Yue, were all pleasantly surprised. The support-type spell that Headmaster Chen had developed by combining all the wisdom he had learned in his life was actually passed on to them just like that. The few of them were filled with fear and trepidation. Everyone hurriedly took out the scrolls from their storage pouches and started reading. The name of this spell was not pretentious, it was called Dessert. The principle of casting spells was also very simple, and the method of making hand seals was also very simple. Effective spell. Just make a hand seal towards the target you want to cast the spell. During the casting process, you need to make eye contact with the target. After being hit by the spell, the target will gradually have the desire to eat desserts and lose the will to fight. If he offered the dessert now, there was a high chance that he would be able to capture the other party's favorability. Effective time. Determined by the caster's realm. The shortest duration is 2 minutes and the longest is 2 days. Spell taboos. Do not use it on patients with diabetes or hyperglycemia. Dispel spell description. Cast dessert on the target again. Everyone in the special training class could not help but fall into deep thought as they stared at the unpretentious instruction manual. This was the legendary Headmaster Chen's lifelong learning? Wang Ling raised his eyebrows. He did not look down on this spell. Instead, he felt that Headmaster Chen was a talent. Although the principle of casting dessert was simple, it was the essence of a heavenly Dao spell called the Great Taste spell that Wang Ling was well versed in. This Great Taste technique was a technique that could control one's mental thoughts and stimulate one's appetite and taste buds. It was richer than dessert, and could be said to be a super upgraded version of Headmaster Chen's dessert. However, Headmaster Chen had been able to design a dessert with the same logic as a heavenly Dao spell with his own strength. Wang Ling couldn't help but admire Headmaster Chen a little. Whether Headmaster Chen had hit the nail on the head by a fluke, or had really carefully considered the principle of dessert, if it could hit the nail on the head, then it was a powerful spell. But then again, the Great Taste spell was actually one of the spells that Wang Ling had listed as useless. Wang Ling felt that this spell was basically useless, because most cultivators could learn to control their appetites after reaching the cultivation realm. Even the students from Titan Middle School, who gobbled down a high-calorie diet every day, ate so much not because their appetites were affected, but purely because they needed it to cultivate the Titan arts. It could only be said that in order to sow discord between Titan Middle School and number 1 Devil Subduing High School, Headmaster Chen had really gone all out this time. Putting aside this self-created dessert spell, just the snacks and desserts in the storage bag were a huge expense. Ordinary desserts and snacks definitely wouldn't make a good impression. So what Headmaster Chen had prepared in the storage bag were all high-end desserts that were hard to buy on the market. After formulating his first plan, Headmaster Chen couldn't help laughing in his heart. Oldly, let's see how you fight me. After formulating his first plan to sow discord, Headmaster Chen began to introduce the students of the next school, South Sea Sky High. This was a high school that also had students in blue uniforms. The difference between them and number 60 High was that number 60 High's uniform was dark blue with a touch of navy blue. South Sea Sky High's school uniform was azure blue, mixed with a few patches of white. In fact, it was sometimes possible to tell what a cultivation school's main learning specialty was from the design of its uniform. South Sea Sky High's specialty is the study of nature, Headmaster Chen said. Headmaster Chen said, the students of South Sea Sky High School have the ability to converse with all living things. They are very powerful perception-type students. There are many spirit plants and spirit beasts on Nine Dragon Mountain. If they use their abilities properly in this kind of terrain, they will have an overwhelming advantage. Furthermore, precisely because they are perception-type students, this group of students from South Sea Sky High is also extremely strong in anti-tracking. They can easily find your location, but it's very likely that you won't be able to find their traces. Then what should we do? Students, there's no need to panic. I've already thought of a way to deal with this. With that, Headmaster Chen waved his hand again, and handed out a second brocade bag to everyone. In order to deal with the students from South Sea Sky High, we have to learn how to deal with the problem. This brocade bag contains a second auxiliary spell that I've designed. This spell is my own secret creation, and I've spent almost all of my life learning. Everyone. Had they heard this sentence somewhere before? Chapter 11-12. Let me introduce to all the students the spell contained in this brocade pouch. I named it Blacklist, Headmaster Chen said. Everyone. As the name implies, this spell can block others from tracking you. Furthermore, it's very simple to cast. You just need to cast it on yourself. During this time, you just need to ask the other party's name. As long as the other party dares to agree, the effect of Blacklist will automatically activate. For the next 10 hours, these perception-type cultivators won't be able to sense your presence. Headmaster Chen said, the key to casting this spell is to catch people off guard. When you arrive at your destination, you just need to meet the students from South Sea Sky High first, cast Blacklist on yourself, and take the initiative to ask for their names. Since it's the first time you've met them, I'm sure they won't refuse to tell you. Wang Ling was stunned. There was actually this kind of operation. To put it simply, Blacklist was a passively triggered spell that would only be triggered under certain circumstances. This setting was a little like the Golden Horned King and the Silver Horned King's Purple Gold Gourd in Journey to the West, which had the feeling of, I'll call you, do you dare answer? As long as they agreed. Blacklist immediately. Of course, what frightened Wang Ling the most wasn't Blacklist itself. It was that Headmaster Chen's Blacklist actually confirmed one of Wang Ling's Heavenly Dao spells. Looking at the spell structure of Blacklist, Wang Ling actually sensed a hint of the Great Shielding spell in it. Although the effect of Blacklist itself was worlds apart from his Great Shielding spell, the basic logic was the same. If the first time was a coincidence, then what was the second time? Wang Ling was increasingly curious about this Headmaster Chen. In fact, whether it was Desert or Blacklist, these were just the tip of the iceberg when it came to Headmaster Chen's vast array of original support spells. One of the biggest characteristics of Headmaster Chen's original support spells was that they were simple, but impractical. However, they could erupt with unexpected effects in certain situations. This was the essence of the Chen family's support spells. Headmaster, how did you come up with these support spells? Lotus Sun took the initiative to ask the question that everyone wanted to know. In reality, everyone present knew very little about Headmaster Chen. Headmaster Chen gladly accepted the question. This was a rare opportunity for the students to understand themselves. Furthermore, the 10 children sitting here were the 10 relatively outstanding student representatives of number 60 high school. Headmaster Chen felt that it was fine for them to share their stories and experiences in front of these student representatives. Usually, no one would listen to him even if he wanted to say a few more words. Do you still remember number 59 high school's Headmaster Jean? He was my fellow disciple in 7 Stars sect back then. Headmaster Chen smiled. Yes. The crowd nodded. Speaking of which, These support-type spells of mine are the paths that I took by chance back then. Headmaster Chen slowly said. The 7-star sex graduation design has always been very strict. Our main major in university is actually auxiliary studies. Back then, our graduation requirement was to design an original support-type spell. Old Jean and I took different routes. In comparison, Old Jin's support spells have more beneficial effects. For example, converging one's heart, or gathering one's strength. These are all spells that can condense strength in a short period of time, improve mental power, and make cultivators stronger and more focused. Old Jin's graduation design was very outstanding at the time. He also used a new concept in the way he cast the spell, which could greatly reduce the time it took to form a hand seal, which resulted in an instantaneous beneficial effect that lasted for a very long time. Unfortunately, Old Jin's outstanding graduation design was rejected in the first round. Why? Asked Super Chin. It's not that Old Jin's design wasn't outstanding enough, but that there were too many original support-type spells like this. In terms of casting effects, there was almost no difference except for the strength and duration of the spell. My university tutor at that time rejected Old Jin's opinion in the first round, but I was inspired by it. Headmaster Chen put his hands behind his back and said proudly, Now the dessert that everyone is looking at is actually the work that I designed when I graduated from university. It sounds a little nonsensical, but I received a very high graduation evaluation. I remember that the old headmaster of 7-star sex evaluation back then was that although dessert was simple, it had a profound Tao, and had a good social value in promoting social relations, and creating a harmonious environment. Thus, it was approved. Everyone. Actually, this wasn't without reason. A lot of people liked to eat desserts because sweetness secreted dopamine in the brain, and dopamine could make people happy. This was the main reason why some people in a bad mood liked to eat desserts. As for promoting social harmony, Wang Ling thought that it was probably because the dessert spell had the effect of increasing people's favorability. However, this favorability was only temporary. It was a little like the legendary suspension bridge effect, which was an illusion created by a spell. But what surprised Wang Ling himself was, as an itinerant immortal, Headmaster Chen had actually studied support type at university, with this kind of realm, but devoting himself to studying support type spells was a little like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. But Wang Ling had to admit that Headmaster Chen was indeed a very talented person. The truth was that until now the students of No. 60 High School still hadn't realized that Headmaster Chen's Chen family's support-type spell had once caused a reign of terror in the martial arts world. In the current circle of headmasters, almost all the Cultivation School headmasters who knew Headmaster Chen and had fought him before had tasted the fear of the Chen family's support-type spell. While number 60 High School was fiercely discussing tactics to deal with the other schools, the other cultivation schools naturally weren't idle either. Number 1 Devil Subduing High School, Titan High School, South Sea Sky High School. Almost at the same time, the headmasters of each school personally came forward to guide the participating students through a pre-match tactical discussion. Contrary to the expectations of the students of the 3 high schools, the first school these headmasters discussed wasn't the high-ranking Key City High School that they had imagined, or those famous high schools with strong students as a whole. Unexpectedly, the first school they discussed was number 60 High School. Chapter 11-13. Songhai City's local high schools might be more familiar with number 60 High's news. But number 1 Devil Subduing High, Titan High and South Sea Sky High were all out of town. The headmasters of those schools might have been paying attention to number 60 High's recent situation, but the students were more concerned about their nearest opponent. In other words, from the very beginning, these students had never regarded the students of number 60 High as an opponent. Even if there was a young miss of Huagua Water Curtain Group like Lotus Sun, the problem was that this was a team battle. No matter how strong one person was, it would be very difficult for them to be the savior. This was just like the League of Legends S9 World Finals, where a sexy little fatty named Azeo was once again getting further and further away from the world championship of his dreams. Once his teammates were screwed up, even a god wouldn't be able to move them. This time, the teacher leading number 60 High is their headmaster. a man called Chen Tianxiang. Number 1 Devil Subduing High's headmaster, Li Qingxi, stood on the dais and started teaching the students of the special training class. He didn't mention the students of number 60 high, and instead directly started with Headmaster Chen. Li Qingxi hadn't thought much of number 60 high at first, but he also didn't underestimate them. However, when he heard that Headmaster Chen was personally leading the team, he instantly panicked a little. After all, that man had tortured him badly back then. I know that all of you may think of the people from number 60 high as rotten fish and shrimps, or even look down on them. But what I want to tell you is that it's not like number 60 high. 1,000-year-old school hasn't produced any talents, Headmaster Li said with a solemn expression. For example, that director Zhua who has been making a name for himself recently, the heroic figure who single-handedly defeated the Demon King Sky-Swallowing Toad 6 years ago. In addition, there are a lot of students who have transferred to number 60 high this semester. Don't tell me all of you haven't figured it out? Headmaster, are you exaggerating? Someone laughed. That director Zhua graduated a long time ago. I have a childhood friend from number 60 high. He said that their school isn't good, and that their overall fighting strength is definitely inferior to ours. Don't ever underestimate any of your opponents. Underestimating them will only make things difficult for you. Li Qingxi stared at this student, a little disgusted with his belittling of the weak. Number 60 high's headmaster Chen Tianxiang was 7 stars sex gold medal support student back then. He was a Cultivation World Support Degree PhD tutor, and the support spells he designed have won numerous international awards, as well as numerous patents. My hands almost went limp with the prize money. Headmaster Li said, moreover, the biggest characteristic of his support spells is that he learns them very quickly and casts them easily. As long as it was used under certain circumstances, it would have an unexpected effect. When you see the students from number 60 high this time, you must be careful. We can't fight them head-on. Then wouldn't it be better to use the puppet technique to control all of them? A student said. No. Headmaster Li shook his head. The essence of support is to wait for the right opportunity. If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. If the enemy moves, I'll move first. If you act rashly, you'll only be at a disadvantage. Moreover, most support-type spells had traps. That's why I suggest that we use passive control spells this time. For example, virus puppets. Virus puppet. Everyone instantly understood. This was indeed an effective way to counter support, although it was a little too sinister to use this method in the National League. Virus puppets developed very quickly. As long as the other party was touched, the other party would instantly become a tool for a period of time. They could only obey orders obediently, otherwise they would have endless headaches. Of course, apart from using the virus puppet spell, I suggest that we form an alliance with other schools. At the very least, we need to ensure that our demon-subduing members don't suffer too many losses in the early to middle 8 days. Headmaster Li Qingxi made all sorts of plans in his heart. Given what that Headmaster Chen Tianxiang knows of me, he definitely thinks that I'll win over acquaintances. Then this time we'll do the exact opposite. Headmaster, you mean? Let's form an alliance with Titan High School. Although we don't have a deep understanding of Titan High School at the moment, I've already calculated that these students from Titan High School are very suitable for our virus puppet and meatball tank battle tactics this time. So there was a meatball tank. Hearing this, everyone's eyes couldn't help but light up. Using these 2 sets of spells would indeed make a huge difference in the course of a team battle. Moreover, if they could develop it to the later stages, they could practically do whatever they wanted. With full control, they could attack and retreat at will. Not only could the meatball tank help them retreat when they encountered danger, it could also be used as the attacking party to take the initiative to form a team. It could only be said that as expected of their Headmaster Li, he could actually think of such tactical thinking. The basic tactics are what I've mentioned above. Headmaster Li Qingxi finished explaining, but for some reason he still vaguely felt a little flustered. Before he became the headmaster of Demon Subduing High School, Li Qingxi clearly remembered that he'd had many opportunities to fight Chen Tianxiang. Unfortunately, every time they fought, he'd always suffered a crushing defeat. The strange thing about this man was that no matter what kind of destructive spell he used, the other party could always use his Chun family's support spell to easily neutralize it with little effort. Thus, even after coming up with these tactical ideas, Li Qingxi still felt very uneasy. He had been abused by Headmaster Chen so many times that it was almost as if he was suffering from psychological trauma. This person's support spell was unfathomable, and his tactical thinking was as deep as the ocean. Li Qingxi believed that among so many opponents, Chen Tianxiang was the most difficult to deal with. But it was different this time. He didn't have to do it himself, but it was a competition between the students. As the headmaster of a school, the game of tactical thinking was also the highlight of this 100-team battle. Their number 1 demon-subduing high school was famous. If they lost to number 60 high school this time, number 60 high school might instead gain momentum. In the past, number 60 high school might not have been so scary. But after Chen Tianxiang took over as the headmaster of number 60 high school, Li Qingxi had almost instantly placed number 60 high school on his list of priorities. He was all too aware of this man's methods. He even knew them better than his own bones. He hated Chen Tianxiang to the bone, and every day and every night, he thought about how to deal with him. Headmaster Li scanned the list of participants in the 100-team battle in his hand, and then scanned the names of the number 60 high school participants. Except for Lotus Sun, he actually didn't recognize a single one of the other students. Many of these students were transfer students who had almost no achievements from cultivation competitions. At most, they had only won a few district awards. Although Li Qingxi didn't think there was anything to fear, he still vaguely felt a little uneasy. Chapter 11-14. Huaxiu Alliance had been a little busy recently. After Dark Ancestor's skull was stolen, they had secretly dispatched tens of thousands of Immortal Arts mobile teams to patrol the country in an attempt to find any clues about Nightmare. Cultivation police stations everywhere were on high alert. If the matter of Dark Ancestor's skull being lost was exposed, Huaxiu Alliance would lose all face. Apart from that, the battle on Nine Dragon Mountain was also officially under Huaxiu Alliance's command. This battle was in fact an anniversary celebration of the founding of the nation, and no one had expected Dark Ancestor's skull to be lost at this time. And most crucially, Xie Sanxiao had ultimately died on Nine Dragon Mountain. Back then President Qi had been unable to eat or sleep in peace these last few days. He was a little worried that what had happened back then would happen again. It was still Monday, November 10th. In the afternoon, President Qi was waiting for an important guest in a conference room on the top floor of Huaxiu Alliance. A shabbily dressed old man was led into the conference room by a dignified and beautiful secretary. The old man had a head full of white hair, and a face full of beard stubble. He wore a sackcloth of the marketplace. If someone were to see him, they would not be able to help but silently criticize him, saying that he was an old man from the countryside. But President Qi's attitude toward this person was unusually respectful. He was one of the Grand 10 generals of Huaxiu Nation. He was the supreme wisdom saint. Now that he saw the old man arrive, he couldn't help stepping forward and gripping the old man's hands tightly. Shizhuan. That was right. This old man was none other than the teacher who had guided President Qi step by step on the path of cultivation back then. At the same time, the old man also had another identity: Chief Guardian of the Heavenly Veins of Huaxiu Nation. This was a hidden position that outsiders didn't know about. All the heavenly veins in Huaxiu Nation had an itinerant immortal guarding them day and night to prevent terrorists from thinking about stealing the resources of the underground spirit veins. Huaxiu's current chief guardian of the heavenly veins of Huaxiu Nation was this ordinary-looking old man in ragged clothes. Old Sir Huangfeng. Protecting the heavenly veins was an extremely arduous task. As the chief protector, old Mr. Huang naturally shouldered this heavy responsibility. The vein of the heavens was located in a rural area with high mountains and dangerous rivers. Living in such a place, one would become like a beggar after a few days, no matter how well dressed one was. This was a tough job, but old Mr. Huang had been holding on to it for thousands of years. Underground spirit veins, especially heaven veins, were extremely precious. They were non-renewable resources. If it was stolen, it would affect Huaxiu Nation's foundation. The vein of the heavens was the destiny of a great country. As the chief protector, old Mr. Huang knew better than anyone else how important it was. Teacher, do you want to take a break first? You asked me to come here in a hurry, because you told me to take a shower first, right? Old Mr. Huang was obviously a casual person. He did not care about his tattered clothes at all. He casually pulled a chair and sat down. Facing his former teacher, President Qi didn't know what to say for a moment. Old Mr. Huang smiled. Dark Ancestor's skull was stolen. Is that what you want to talk about? Teacher, how do you know about this? President Qi had an astonished expression on his face. This matter was highly confidential. The number of Immortal Arts mobile squads has increased. In addition, there's going to be a 100-team battle for those kids on Nine Dragon Mountain. I was wondering if this had anything to do with Nine Dragon Mountain. Speaking of Nine Dragon Mountain, the first thing I thought of was naturally that all-powerful legend Dark Ancestor. Old Mr. Huang said, with so many Immortal Art mobile squadrons moving out at the same time, I'm guessing they're searching for something. However, I wasn't sure what it was until I saw you. Teacher, this student admires you for having such foresight. President Qi bowed. Of course, he had invited old Mr. Huang here to find out the truth. Old Mr. Huang's spirit root was a special legendary spirit root, which had a mystical psychic quality. The moment old Mr. Huang saw President Qi, he immediately saw the phantom image of a bone in his mind. He immediately knew that Dark Ancestor's skull had been lost. If it wasn't for the situation, this disciple would never have dared disturb teacher. All right, enough with the pleasantries. Old Mr. Huang waved his hand. Come, tell me everything that happened in detail. President Qi nodded. Using mental transmission, he instantly transmitted the whole story to old Mr. Huang's mind. Old Mr. Huang's eyes lit up. Nightmare, this guy is still alive? There's actually a weirdo who can bring the dead back to life. Teacher, can you find Nightmare's whereabouts? I'll try. Old Mr. Huang took a deep breath. He focused his mental energy, and the scene in his mind instantly turned into a cloud of smoke. A few minutes later, old Mr. Huang opened his eyes, his forehead drenched in sweat, and he couldn't help the astonishment in his eyes. Strange. What's wrong, teacher? What's wrong? Nothing like this has ever happened in my psychic dream. Old Mr. Huang said. Old Mr. Huang said, in the past, when I wanted to communicate with the spirit, even if I couldn't see the object clearly, I could still make a rough outline of the object. Finally, I could combine it with the actual situation and analyze it. Usually, I could find some clues. But this time, when I was psychic, I saw that there was fog in my spirit sea, and I couldn't even see the outline. President Qi. What do you think, teacher? The strength of this person behind the scenes can't be underestimated. I'm afraid he's stronger than me. If this person intends to resurrect Dark Ancestor, I'm afraid that Dark Ancestor is nothing more than a pawn. The other party probably wants to use Dark Ancestor's power to achieve something. But what on earth is it? Old Mr. Huang murmured to himself. However, his words had hit the nail on the head. In just a few seconds, this pair of master and disciple actually thought of the same thing. Their faces were alarmed, and their hair stood on end almost instantly. The main vein valve, they said in unison. The other party had definitely resurrected Dark Ancestor for the main vein valve on Nine Dragon Mountain. The person behind the scenes wanted to imitate Dark Ancestor back then, and use the natural resonance between the ancient divine clan and the underground spirit veins to absorb all the underground spirit veins on Earth from the main vein. At that time, Earth spirit chi would dry up, and it would be beyond redemption. This is a serious matter. We have to strangle Dark Ancestor in the cradle as soon as possible. Old Mr. Huang's expression was solemn. Since no one in the world is Dark Ancestor's match, we have to gather the strength of all the experts to suppress him. We have to take down Dark Ancestor. This person is too deranged. Once he revives, he'll definitely start a massacre. Chapter 11:15. The severity of the situation had reached a point where there was no room for delay. If the underground spirit vein was drained dry, the only consequence would be the depletion of Earth's spirit chi. human cultivators wouldn't be completely destroyed. But what was truly frightening was the conspiracy behind the absorption of this massive spirit vein. Back then, Dark Ancestor Xie Sanshao had overestimated his capacity, and in the end, because he couldn't withstand the enormous energy, he suffered a backlash from the spirit vein and died on the spot. So, if the person behind the scenes who had the ability to resurrect Dark Ancestor tried to use the power of the ancient divine clan to pry open the main vein valve and restart the absorption plan Dark Ancestor had thought of back then, what on earth would happen? Teacher, is there really someone in this world who can absorb all the underground spirit veins on Earth? President Qi had always been doubtful. Back then, Dark Ancestor had already become a sage with a terrifying physique that was practically indestructible. He was the first and founder of the Dark Network, and was also known as the most evil man on Earth back then. If even Dark Ancestor's body couldn't withstand the pressure of the energy backlash, who else could do it? Huang Feng's expression was also gloomy as he pondered the same question. As the chief guardian of the heavenly vein, Old Man Huang had been guarding the main vein valve on Nine Dragon Mountain for hundreds and thousands of years. His understanding of the underground spirit vein was even better than that of some people from the ancient divine clan. What is certain now is that Dark Ancestor is nothing more than a pawn in this matter. The true plot of the person behind the scenes is to open the main vein valve and suck the underground spirit vein dry. If there really is a way to absorb the underground spirit vein and completely store it in the body, I'm afraid that this person's strength will far exceed that of anyone on Earth, and he will reach the realm above true immortal. Venerated immortal. Rumor has it that the venerated immortal realm is the Tao realm, which is also called Tao Ancestor. But we don't know if there is a higher realm after Tao Ancestor. There is a higher realm. President Qi was lost in thought. President Qi believed this, but he didn't dare think too much about it. As mentioned earlier in the fundamentals of cultivation truth, cultivation was an endless process. It was just like a person's experience bar. The more they grew and climbed, the more experience they needed to fill it up. And whether or not they could break through a bottleneck depended on whether or not their experience bar could overflow after it was filled up. As a cultivator, the key to a cultivator's cultivation lay in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Therefore, in theory, if all the spiritual energy of the entire earth was sucked dry and stored in one's body, it was indeed possible to break through powerful heights that ordinary people could not reach in a short period of time. However, such a plan required the support of a powerful physical body. In theory, the physical sanctification was the highest level that could be achieved with the physical body. Back then, the main reason for Dark Ancestor's defeat was because he thought he was indestructible and was too arrogant. In that case, could the mastermind really do it? The white-haired boy pushed open the tightly shut door of the abandoned factory and walked out. Your Excellency. Nightmare bowed and presented Dark Ancestor's skull with both hands. The white-haired man formed a seal with one hand and raised his sword fingers. He guided the skulls up into the sky and then back down. Nightmare already knew that this was the resurrection spell specially created by this lord, and it was the first time he had seen such a resurrection spell in his life. It wasn't that he hadn't read up on how to manipulate and resurrect dead souls, but there was always a huge price to pay in exchange for a life. But Nightmare realized that the resurrection spell used by the white-haired man was completely different from the forbidden spells he knew of. There was no darkness in this resurrection spell at all. On the contrary, Nightmare could sense boundless vitality as white hair cast the spell. The vitality of the revival of all living things and the radiance of souls made the shapeshifter involuntarily feel relaxed and happy. Even the soul of a bystander felt a sense of comfort under the effect of the spell's radiation. It was as if the spring breeze and rain were silently moisturizing everything. It could only be said that, as expected of Lord Whitehair, Nightmare watched from the side, unable to suppress his admiration for the white-haired man. After making sure that the skull was buried in the ground, the white-haired man injected spirit chi into it. With a wave of his hand, an emerald green sprout immediately appeared on the ground. The flower of revival will bloom tomorrow. Stand guard here, and wake me up when the flower blooms. The spell didn't seem to be particularly exhausting, but it actually made Whitehair feel a sense of fatigue after using it. So the side effect of using the resurrection spell was just drowsiness. Nightmare was still shocked. If it was just drowsiness, what was the difference between that and no side effect? This was the resurrection spell. If a person could be resurrected just by sleeping, this ability was too frightening. Under Nightmare's shocked gaze, the white-haired man returned to his room. There was a mirror in the room. Whitehair walked to the mirror, looking somewhat tired. This was a normal symptom after using the resurrection spell. The white-haired man stared at himself in the mirror and yawned. He reached out and touched his face, a very complicated thought emerging in his mind. Why did he have to look like that person? But that person had never looked at him. Whitehair stared at his face in the mirror, slightly dazed. A moment later, a strand of hair fell and floated into the sink in front of Whitehair. It was a strand of white hair that had been separated from Whitehair's body. In fact, the side effect of using the resurrection spell wasn't just drowsiness as Nightmare had imagined. That was a spell that could completely resurrect a person, and it definitely couldn't violate the Heavenly Tao's principle of equivalent exchange. Therefore, even Whitehair had to pay a painful price. However, this price wasn't reflected in the loss of lifespan or internal injuries. Compared to the other side effects of the resurrection spell, Whitehair's side effect was actually relatively mild, but it was a little hard to accept. He stared at himself in the mirror, and the strand of white hair that had fallen to the ground. He carefully picked up the strand of white hair with his slender fingers, then took out a golden needle, and put the strand of white hair through the small hole behind the golden needle. Whitehair knew very well what he was doing, but he had no other choice. This was because the side effect of the resurrection spell was something he had to bear. Therefore, he looked at himself in the mirror and plucked the white hair off his head, revealing his smooth and round head that looked like a braised egg. Then, he used the golden needle to firmly sew the strand of hair onto the wig. This was a wig made from his real hair. Therefore, the side effect of the resurrection spell was hair loss. Moreover, this hair loss was irreversible. Once it fell off, it would never grow back. Chapter 11:16. It was Tuesday, November 11th. Headmaster Chen led Wang Ling and the rest of the students participating in the special training class through the third major course after Understanding Spirit Plants and Understanding Opponents, Actual Combat Training. Headmaster Chen had already spent the day picking out the key points for the first two classes. Wang Ling and the others would have to go back and flip through the lecture notes to memorize as much as possible for the rest of the content. Since this body techniques exchange event had already been upgraded to a national competition, and number 60 High was now at the stage of being approved as a key city high school, Headmaster Chen really wanted number 60 High to shine in this competition. If number 60 High could be upgraded to a higher level during his term as headmaster, it would be extremely beneficial for his future career, as well as for the students and teachers here. The 8-day survival battle in the wilderness was a very arduous task. With 102 high schools across the country in such a large area as Nine Dragon Mountain, the national competition this time was significantly more challenging and dangerous than in previous years. Because the competition format for the previous year's Body Techniques Exchange event had been small, the wilderness map chosen had been carefully considered, and wasn't as vast as Nine Dragon Mountain. But even in a relatively small area, there was still a chance that all the participating students in previous years would be wiped out. Now that everyone was on Nine Dragon Mountain, if they weren't careful at all, it was very likely that they would all die in battle. Headmaster Chen couldn't share much of his experience with the survival battle in the wilderness. For this reason, he had used his connections to invite a special teacher. He was an active soldier from the magnificent Immortal Special Forces, San Yuan. He was a man wrapped up from head to toe and dressed like a brocade guard. There was a metal mask on the lower half of his face, with the symbol of the magnificent immortal engraved on it. From his eyes, San Yuan also had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. Clearly, he wasn't covering himself because he was ugly. This was probably due to some kind of confidentiality agreement, which prevented San Yuan from completely revealing his true appearance. Everyone was amazed and couldn't help but sigh at Headmaster Chen's powerful connections. This was a member of the magnificent Immortal Special Forces, the most famous special forces in Huaxiao Nation. They had carried out many major missions for the country. President Qi had previously borrowed Jia Yin to be Wang Ming's bodyguard, but that was President Qi, one of the 10 generals of Huaxiu Nation, and it was actually very easy for him to transfer someone. But Wang Ling hadn't expected Headmaster Chen to have such powerful connections. What's more, San Yuan was actually on vacation. In essence, he was someone who was resting. He had clearly given Headmaster Chen a lot of face by agreeing to teach him. Thank you for your hard work, Brother San Yuan. Headmaster Chen smiled and patted San Yuan on the shoulder. San Yuan stood ramrod straight from beginning to end, maintaining the excellent military posture of a member of the Special Forces. It wasn't just the students in the special training class. Many of the students who were taking a walk and relaxing in the field after class also saw San Yuan's extremely solemn silhouette in the distance. This group of people in the special training class is too lucky. They can actually be taught by the magnificent Immortal Special Forces. Are they really from Magnificent Immortal? I thought it was cosplay. No one dares to cosplay this. They'll be caught for tea. Hey, so envious. It's my fault for not being strong enough to be chosen. Can I take photos? As soon as the student took out his phone, San Yuan's gaze followed the phone's lens and swept over him. The astonishing pressure of his gaze made the boy so scared that he stiffened all over, and in a moment of carelessness, he directly dropped his phone on the ground. Seeing this scene, Headmaster Chen hurriedly apologized. Sorry San Yuan, it was my oversight. I'll text the teachers and keep an eye on the students' phones for the time being. Don't worry, the school's surveillance cameras were turned off when you came, so there won't be any video of you. Sorry for the trouble. San Yuan's magnetic male voice came from under the iron mask. After taking a deep breath, San Yuan started to face the crowd. Today, Headmaster Chen asked me to teach you. Do you know what the first thing you need to survive in the wild is? Food and water, Super Chen replied. That's right. This is a problem that everyone has to face in the wild. Speaking up to this point, San Yuan started to talk about what he was going to teach today. But your challenge this time is even more difficult. Not only do you have to find the right food and water, you also have to think of a way to cleverly fight the teams from other schools in the process. So today's first lesson is relatively simple. It's just to eat. You need to put the food into your mouth as quickly as possible and then eat it. Eat. Hirogua laughed. What's there to teach? It does look very simple, but my lesson is a little different. The difficulty level will increase later. After San Yuan said that, a spirit light flashed in his hand, and a sparkling and translucent spirit fruit appeared. This spirit fruit was very large, the size of a coconut. It's a blue crystal fruit. Super Chen immediately recognized it. They had already taken a spirit plants class yesterday, so they quickly recognized this fruit. The blue crystal fruit was a specialty of Nine Dragon Mountain. It was large and plentiful, and in addition to replenishing the body's water supply and filling the stomach, it could also replenish the body's spirit energy. Furthermore, the core of the blue crystal fruit could be ground into powder and applied to wounds, which could also stop pain and bleeding. This was a fruit that had many uses. However, the conditions for the growth of the blue crystal fruit were a little harsh, and it wasn't available in all areas. When Headmaster Chen had talked about this yesterday, he had already sensed that the areas where the blue crystal fruit was produced were very likely to become war zones where student teams competed for resources after the body technique exchange meet. San Yuan said, "In our special forces, there are times when we don't have enough fasting pills for combat, and we look for suitable resources in the wild to replenish our strength. However, many edible spirit plants in the cultivation world are very large. In order not to delay the battle, we have undergone strict training to eat at the speed at which we eat, like this blue crystal fruit." Speaking up to this point, San Yuan had already put one hand on his mask. Xiao in the blink of an eye. The next moment, the blue crystal fruit the size of a coconut in his hand completely disappeared. San Yuan. As you can see, in that half a second, I took off my mask, ate the whole blue crystal fruit, and then put my mask back on. Everyone. Of course, the speed at which you eat can only be trained for a long time. You don't need to have the speed of our special forces. Today, everyone's mission was to eat this blue crystal fruit within 5 seconds. If you don't do it in time, you'll have to start over. San Yuan waved his hand and gave everyone a fruit. Now let's start. Chapter 11:17. It was clearly unrealistic to eat a coconut-sized spirit fruit in 5 seconds. The truth was that Wang Ling had been using his king's eye to clearly analyze everything in front of him, as San Yuan had performed. San Yuan did not actually eat the blue crystal fruit. Instead, he used some kind of spell to absorb the blue crystal fruit into his body. It was probably a kind of devouring spell. The essence of eating was to provide energy for the body. As a member of the special forces, San Yuan didn't care at all what food tasted like. As long as it provided the body with the nutrients it needed and quickly replenished its physical strength and spirit power, everything else was just ordinary protein to him. But Wang Ling had to admit that San Yuan was indeed astonishingly fast. He took off his mask and swiftly used the devouring spell to vaporize and absorb the blue crystal fruit through his pores. It looked like he had eaten it in an instant. This was a breathing method. The downside was that you couldn't enjoy the food itself, but the point was that it could quickly replenish your physical strength. And most importantly, you wouldn't feel bloated. After all, the stomach's capacity was limited. If you kept eating without restraint, you wouldn't be able to complete the mission even if you ate until you died. So the truth was that San Yuan's hint was already very obvious. Their training mission today was to eat the fruit in the shortest possible time. If they relied purely on normal food to achieve their goal, it would be very difficult to achieve the final result. Wang Ling could see this, and so could Wang Zhen and the others, but they couldn't make it too obvious. But when all was said and done, they were elites who had been carefully selected from number 60 high school. Although there were a lot of hidden bigwigs in this competition class, these genuine elite students weren't just for show. Lotus Sun, Super Chun, Xiaming, Hirogua and the others quickly realized what was going on. And it was Li Yuyue who had first suggested this idea. Teacher San Yuan probably didn't really eat the fruit with his mouth, right? Li Yuyue smiled with curved eyebrows. This girl was the one Wang Ling had mentioned before. She was in the same class as Fang Xing and Xiaming. Furthermore, she was the class monitor in Fang Xing's class and had outstanding grades. Wang Ling had heard that Li Yuyue's family was in the food and beverage business, and she had done her own research on cooking. As the class monitor of Class 3, Lotus Sun wasn't as unfamiliar with Li Yuyue as Wang Ling was. After all, there were many ways for girls to develop feelings for each other. Going to the bathroom hand in hand and having lunch together are all good ways to promote friendship. I heard my grandfather say that the existence of delicious food makes people feel happy. Therefore, cooking food as delicious as possible was not only a way to respect the food, but also a way to make the people who ate the food feel happy. Those who don't enjoy their food are insulting and trampling on life. Li Yue swayed her ponytail. There was a special kind of spirit in it, which stemmed from her respect for food and confidence in her cooking. Wang Ling felt that it was all too familiar. He had once sensed the exact same aura from Old Man Wang. People who could make delicious food usually had a good personality. Li Yue was obviously a sunny and cheerful girl. But my grandfather also said that there's a special case. Only those who have been silently carrying the burden for the people for many years in order to build the great rivers and mountains. Only they have the right to put more energy into other areas. Saying this, Li Yue turned her gaze to San Yuan. Teacher San Yuan, in order to save time and devote more energy to missions, it's probably been a long time since you've carefully tasted the taste of the food itself. After saying this, Li Yue didn't intend to continue playing with her words. After all, there was a time limit for the training, so she immediately told everyone what she had guessed. My father said that in the wild, professional soldiers often use a special method to speed up the digestion and absorption of food. There's a general category of this method called the devouring spell. Hearing this, San Yuan raised his eyebrows slightly. To be honest, he was a little surprised that number 60 high school students could so quickly figure out the key points of the special training. When Headmaster Chen had found him, he had already planned out the special training for the next few days. Food was just the first and simplest lesson in the special training plan. But considering the overall level of number 60 high school compared to other schools, San Yuan felt that it would take them some time to see through his smokescreen, even if they were students from the elite class. He didn't expect that his trick would be immediately seen through by a student. Seeing San Yuan's astonished expression, Li Yue was even more certain of her guess. Looking at teacher San Yuan's expression, I'm probably right. Also, judging from the way teacher San Yuan absorbed the food just now, this devouring spell should be a way to absorb energy through the pores. It's also known as the pore devouring spell. Judging from teacher San Yuan's absorption speed, I'm 100% certain that he has already cultivated it to the top level. That's right. I didn't expect you to see through it so quickly. Under the mask, San Yuan gave a gratified smile. It seems that you know far more than I thought. It's just an accumulation of extracurricular knowledge. I believe that the other students know this as well. After saying this, Li Yue stepped back to one side. San Yuan shrugged helplessly and took out another blue crystal fruit. Now I'll teach you in slow motion. Everyone just needs to follow suit. The pore devouring spell isn't difficult, but if you want to cultivate it to my level, you'll have to spend a lot of time studying and practicing hard. Everyone work hard. But as soon as San Yuan said this, Lotus Sun had already used the pore devouring spell on the other side to absorb the blue crystal fruit in her hand. Teacher San Yuan, is it like this? Lotus Sun asked humbly. Although this process wasn't as fast as San Yuan's, he was still taken aback. Has student Lotus Sun learned it before? No, I saw it the first time teacher San Yuan demonstrated it. The corner of San Yuan's mouth twitched. The first time. He hadn't taught them the first time. He had just demonstrated it in passing. San Yuan felt that he had been deceived by Headmaster Chen. Because when Headmaster Chen had come to look for him, he had clearly told him that this was the worst batch of students he had ever taught. In the end, this rotten old man was very bad. Chapter 11-18. Teaching and learning helped each other, and in the process of teaching, one could also grow. San Yuan agreed to help, and at the same time, he could review some of the knowledge he had learned before. Studying the old and learning the new, and gaining new inspiration and breakthroughs in magic through teaching and educating people could actually be considered a path. This was also why some grandmasters liked to find stupid disciples to teach. The harder they taught, the more enlightenment they would gain. Moreover, according to the latest research data, the probability of teachers in the world of cultivators making new breakthroughs in spell structure is 7 to 15% higher than that of orthodox cultivators. San Yuan had come to number 60 high for the new enlightenment he had gained from teaching, but in the end, he realized that the students in this special training class were actually smarter than the next. Teacher San Yuan, is that so? Wang Zhen pretended to be timid as he performed the devouring spell in front of everyone. Furthermore, his absorption speed was so fast that it was almost on par with San Yuan's. Well done. San Yuan's face twitched slightly under his mask. He had never thought that the students of number 60 high would be so talented in cultivation. San Yuan had heard of quite a few famous schools participating in the national competition this time. Based on the ranking of their combat strength, San Yuan thought that number 60 high would be lucky to be able to enter the top 50. But after interacting with them this time, San Yuan had to admit that he had been wrong. The students of number 60 high were much stronger than he had imagined. Since everyone has learned it, let's move on to the next lesson. After saying that, San Yuan gave everyone a pair of black sunglasses. What's this? It's an entertainment program for us during special training. I specially borrowed it this time. Its full name is Mountain River Construction Mirror. It used to be very valuable, but now it's a mass-produced magic treasure. But you still have to return it to me after you're done with it. San Yuan said. Simply put, this pair of glasses will synchronize everyone's mental networks. I've already set the glasses in my hand as the main glasses. That is to say, after you put on the glasses, you can follow me into my mental world. After San Yuan said this, everyone nodded. He had also guessed that the next lesson would be the actual combat lesson. He had been wondering whether he should go easy on them, But now that San Yuan had given him the glasses to synchronize his mental power, he instantly relaxed a lot. In the spiritual world, even if he accidentally lost control of his strength, it wouldn't directly threaten a person's life. It should still be rather safe. This time, we will be using a one-on-one challenge mode. You will need to challenge 6 people, and the final 6th lord, which is me, will be me. As long as you defeat 6 people, today's test will be considered complete, San Yuan said. In fact, this was tomorrow's training, but unfortunately, Wang Ling and the others' performance had been too outstanding, so the body technique training had to be brought forward. As for the checkpoints, they had been set up beforehand. San Yuan remembered them all. As long as he did a good job of controlling the situation, there would be no problem. This was just a group of high school students from a key district high school. San Yuan felt that as a professional cultivator special forces soldier, he would be able to handle them. We only need to defeat the past lord. There is a time limit to defeating them. If you exceed the time limit, you will have to start from the beginning, San Yuan said. Everyone needs to closely observe the actions of every past lord when clearing the levels. They all have their flaws and weaknesses. As long as you grasp onto them, it will be very easy to clear the levels. Wang Ling fell silent. Judging from San Yuan's description, the body technique test this time wasn't so much about cultivating body techniques, as it was about developing observation skills. Observational skills were also an important lesson for cultivators in the study of body techniques. In body technique duels, more and more classic cases proved that sometimes it wasn't always the side with the upper hand who had the upper hand who would win. Strength was just an advantage, but to turn it into victory, one also needed to combine one's own experience and the ability to observe in an instant. Powerful body technique cultivators had extremely good observation skills. Some could even catch an opponent's flaw in the instant they punched. Even if they weren't as strong as their opponent, they could combine their observation skills with their speed to attack their vitals. This was how it was said that there is nothing in the world of martial arts that can't be overcome, but speed. But to have this kind of observation and speed, it was far from enough to rely on reflexes alone. This was a natural reflex that formed muscle memory after years of training. It might seem like those international kung fu masters could detect something in an instant, but it was actually more of a conditioned reflex. But there was a certain difference between real body techniques and traditional martial arts. For example, in traditional Tai Chi and Wing Chun, many of the lethal moves had already been toned down. The reason why traditional martial arts could survive to this day was because of the spirit of martial arts and morality, as well as the effect of strengthening the body. But there were always people who didn't know their place. Some self-proclaimed kung fu masters liked to fight on the stage of mixed martial arts and used these self-cultivation martial arts to fight, but in the end, they only humiliated themselves. But Wang Ling always felt that it was necessary to pass on traditional martial arts. Furthermore, traditional martial arts and mixed martial arts had their own advantages. Although Sonda could win in a match, the training of this boxing technique would cause damage to the body, and it would accumulate over the years. In the end, it was still the cultivators who used traditional martial arts to cultivate their bodies who lived longer. Wang Ling put on his sunglasses. At that moment, there were a lot of questions in his mind from Gu Xuanji, Wang Zhen and the others. This was their first time pretending to be high school students, and they weren't too sure what level they should reach for this kind of test. Gu Xuanji, Senior, should we pretend a little? It's better not to go overboard. If we're at the level of an outstanding high school student, how about 10 rounds to determine the winner? Wang Ling. Wang Zhen. That's not enough. I think it's safer to add another 5 rounds. Also, it should be better if we put on an act. Didn't teacher San Yuan say that we should look for flaws? We should be able to see everyone's situation, right? That's right, it's better to put on an act. Jin Yuan also agreed with this view. We have to put on an act, otherwise it'll be too fake. At that moment, Lu Qingyi also said, why would we need to look for flaws in a showdown at this level? One punch should be enough to settle it, right? Wang Ling. Lu Qingyi's words were in fact true. Although not all cultivators with an advantage in strength could win in the end, if the gap in strength was too large, that is, if one side had absolute strength, there would be no suspense in the outcome. Chapter 11:19. As the others had said, Wang Ling once again had to bring out his acting skills at the critical moment. But after so many years of cultivation, Wang Ling felt that his acting skills were just so-so. It was like when Dopigua had taken him to film during the summer break. His acting skills were as stiff as ever, but this was completely natural, so it didn't look as awkward. Without lines, Wang Ling felt that he could act better than most fresh meats. At the very least, it was natural. If he hired a better dubbing actor and he lip-synced, he would be able to debut as the center. And he would be able to do it. Putting on his sunglasses and opening the mental link, Wang Ling saw his opponent in the first round. This was an extremely effeminate man who looked like a shoddily made CG character in a web-based game. His armor gave off a faint green light, and Wang Ling couldn't help thinking of that classic brainwashing advertising slogan. Green green, Gutianla is green. My surname is Jiang, I'm an architect. Contrary to Wang Ling's expectations, his opponent in the first round didn't immediately start fighting after he appeared. There was even a F***king plot trigger. Wang Ling guessed that this was probably a plot cut from some game. But it was more likely to be used for military combat simulation training, so Magnificent Immortal had probably paid a copyright fee. Are you the person who's here to challenge me? This architect with the surname Jiang stared at Wang Ling with an obvious hostility in his eyes. Now please answer 3 questions for me. If you can answer them correctly, then I'll let you pass this round, said the architect surnamed Jiang. Wang Ling. Without waiting for Wang Ling to ridicule him in his heart, the architect continued to mutter to himself. Which part of masonry material can't be made from the waste residue discharged from industrial production as the main raw material? Wang Ling. Without even giving Wang Ling time to think, this architect's surname Jiang suddenly flew into a rage less than 2 seconds after asking his question. I knew you wouldn't be able to answer. You're just like that hateful woman. You clearly stole my design, but you say you designed it yourself, and even took my work to receive an award. Eat my fist. He threw a punch at Wang Ling's face. Not only was this punch caught Wang Ling off guard, it was also merciless. Although it was only a simulation training in the mental space, and would not cause physical harm, under normal circumstances, if one was hit by this punch, the brain would still judge the pain after being hit because of the connection between the brain and nerves. Fortunately, the opponent in this simulated mental space wasn't very strong, and Wang Ling was able to easily see through the other party's attack by following the trajectory of his punches. He once again used his simple body technique to evade the attack in a seemingly casual manner. At the same time, he was thinking about what teacher San Yuan had said. Every opponent had their own flaws, so what was the flaw of this architect surnamed Jiang? As Wang Ling pondered this in his heart, he observed the architect's movements, and abruptly noticed that the architect's lower body looked unusually stable. No matter how his opponent's fist technique changed, his lower body remained in an extremely stable triangular shape. The triangle was the most stable structure, and this structure was naturally loved by architects. Obviously, the architect in front of him was a triangle fanatic. The crazier he was, the easier it was for him to expose his flaws. Wang Ling stared at the opponent's lower body and found a flaw. On the other side, everyone else had pretty much the same idea as Wang Ling, and each of them used their own special abilities to attack the architect's lower body in unison. Super Chin used a sweeping kick. Although it was simple, it was a very effective way to restrain the opponent, and after breaking the stability of the opponent's lower body, seizing the opportunity, Super Chin used a combination of punches to directly clear the first level. Dopigua's method of clearing the first level was slightly more complicated than Super Chen's, because he was heavier to begin with, and a flexible leg sweep like this wouldn't work at all. Thus, after thinking about it, Dopigua used his rolling technique. This was a compressed version of the meatball tank. In comparison, it might not be very powerful, but it was very effective in restraining body techniques. For the time being, these two people were using relatively normal melee restraining techniques. On the other side, Wang Ling had categorized Xia Ming and Li Yue into the showy group. These two people had one thing in common, and that was that they wanted to be strong. Because of this, the restraining techniques they used were practically just for show. Evil Wind Leg, Devil Wind Leg. Both of them displayed their powerful leg techniques at the same time. As for Lotus Sun, she hadn't participated in the first round at all, and with her extremely quick reaction, she had answered the architect's question correctly and cleared the stage on the spot. In the end, a top student was a top student. As expected of the strongest young miss in number 60 High's delegation this time. Outside, San Yuan exclaimed in admiration as he observed the other people's passing results. Now only the real bigwigs like Wang Zhen, Zhen Yuan, Gu Xuanji and Lu Qingyi had yet to make a move. They were all waiting for Wang Ling to make a move. This was their first time acting, and they were still a little inexperienced. They clumsily imitated Wang Ling's posture, and even the angles at which they attacked were surprisingly consistent. San Yuan was dumbfounded. These people were clearly new transfer students, but they actually had this kind of tacit understanding. It was said that no 60 High had hidden dragons and crouching tigers this year, and San Yuan now felt that these transfer students were a little mysterious. San Yuan had heard that these people had done very well in the entrance test, but after seeing them with his own eyes, this extraordinary feeling made him a little excited. This year's number 60 High was something to look forward to. Lu Qingyi had been imitating Wang Zhen's movements at first, but she seemed to hate this kind of timid feeling. Perhaps it was because she and Wang Zhen were living together in Wei Ji's house, and the small friction that arose in their daily lives. Lu Qingyi's anger was almost instantly ignited. This Wang Zhen really didn't care about his life at all. After going to the toilet, he kept putting his finger in the toilet, which always caused it to clog. When he brushed his teeth in the morning, he didn't even put the cap back on the toothpaste. The most abominable thing was at night, when he snored so loudly in his sleep. He kept disturbing her rest. How could she, Lu Qingyi, take a liking to this hateful man? Thinking this, Lu Qingyi gritted her teeth hatefully. In any case, it was just an attack on a man's lower body. Did it have to be so complicated? Thus, Lu Qingyi straightaway kicked the architect surnamed Jiang in front of her. This was a move that all girls knew how to use. Provoking sterilizing leg. Chapter 11:20. After seeing Lu Qingyi's violent kick, Wang Ling, Gu Xuanji, Wang Zhen and Zhen Yuan all felt a chill in their lower bodies. Because Wang Zhen and Lu Qingyi had descended to the mortal world without permission, they were still being punished by heavenly Tao. Back then, Wang Ling had thought of a way to arrange for Wang Zhen and Lu Qingyi to stay at Wei Ji's place because of Mother Wang. These two people's tempers didn't seem to get along, but in Wang Ling's opinion, they were actually a good match. Wang Ling's original intention had been to help them get to know each other better and communicate their feelings in passing, but in the end, communication had gone awry instead. It was said that distance made the heart grow fonder. Sure enough, this was true. When it came to relationships, wasn't it better to let nature take its course? A forcibly picked melon wasn't sweet. Seeing Lu Qingyi kick him so fiercely, Wang Zhen couldn't help trembling, and he couldn't help covering his big treasure. He thought about how he had been kicked the day before because he had accidentally used Lu Qingyi's toothbrush when brushing his teeth in the morning. He then recalled how he had taken a sip of the bottled drink on the table in the living room 2 days ago. He thought it was Wei Ji's drink, but it turned out to be Lu Qingyi's drink. Just like that, he was kicked again. He also thought about how Lu Qingyi had started to chase after local stars from Earth 3 days ago, and how he had just casually criticized the acting skills of some young male stars nowadays, so he had been kicked. It had only been a few short weeks, but Wang Zhen already couldn't remember how many times he had been kicked. In any case, the fact was that Lu Qingyi's legs were getting stronger and stronger, and he was close to mastering the iron crotch technique. It's too hard on me. Wang Zhen couldn't help feeling aggrieved, and even his eyes became moist. As a man, Wang Zhen didn't care to bicker with Lu Qingyi. Furthermore, he realized that he had a natural tolerance for her. No matter what kind of excessive behavior she did to him, he actually wouldn't get angry. Of course, Wang Zhen didn't believe that he had already fallen in love with this violent woman. He had been beaten by his parents since he was a child, so when he thought about it, he felt that perhaps it was because he had grown up in an environment of sticks that he had developed an immunity to violent behavior. Wang Ling could clearly hear Wang Zhen's thoughts. It could only be said that Wang Zhen was a man with a strong heart. He had been subjected to violence since he was a child, yet he was able to thrive in such an environment. After he grew up, his heart hadn't become particularly twisted or autistic. This was the most amazing thing about him. If it was a normal person, who could do this? From the bottom of his heart, Wang Ling resisted violence, whether it was domestic or school violence. Cold violence was one of the most common and easily overlooked forms of violence on campus. An isolated environment was not conducive to physical and mental development, but many parents obviously did not take this seriously. Perhaps in every school, or even in every class, there would be a student who was isolated. This was the most frightening thing. Perhaps everyone had bullied a classmate who had been ostracized in class due to their ignorance when they were young, or perhaps everyone owed that classmate an apology. However, as time passed, the wounds of the past were destined to be unstoppable with bandages. What everyone could do now was to start from the people around them, telling their friends, their family, and even their future children to treat the people around them as gently as possible in life. Actually, Wang Ling himself did want to be isolated. At the very least, it would save him some trouble. But from a young age until now, it seemed that everyone's gaze had never strayed far from Wang Ling. Because his methods of keeping his grades down as a child weren't stable, there were times when he didn't pay attention and performed exceedingly well. This was also the predicament he had faced as a child. When his thoughts returned, Wang Ling had already arrived at the second checkpoint that San Yuan had set up. The second checkpoint was about a tall young man wearing a mink. The other party had very distinctive dreadlocks, wore a pair of sunglasses, wore a large gold chain around his neck, and had an agile, swaying body, which proved that he was a rapper. Rap itself was a form of music. Wang Ling's mouth had never been very nimble, and he hadn't had much interest in rap, which required improvisation and freestyle from the very beginning. Back then, when national hip-hop had been popular, his classmates and friends had all been talking about rappers who improvised lyrics and dissed other people's lives in order to gain popularity with the audience. Only Wang Ling himself was uninterested. His eyes were fixed on the rapper in the mink coat in front of him, whom he would call Brother Mink for the time being. Considering Brother Mink's identity as a rapper, Wang Ling's first thought was that the other party might use a combination of soundwave spells and body skills to launch an attack. This kind of soundwave spell didn't necessarily need to be shouted out, as many people had a stereotypical impression of soundwave spells. In fact, many advanced soundwave spells were almost invisible, and didn't need to be shouted out. A soft murmur could also be very lethal. Through the chanting of a high-grade soundwave spell, he could create a hallucinatory effect on the opponent. As long as he grasped the timing of the hallucination, he could use his body technique to seize the opportunity and strike a heavy blow when the opponent's mind was in a trance. Once a vital point was hit, most people wouldn't be able to react in time before they were already lying on the ground. Thus, the key to clearing this stage was to use the acupoint sealing ability he had mastered in high school to seal off the ear aperture and prevent the other party's soundwave spell from wreaking havoc in the dark. But what happened next made Wang Ling feel that he was in the end still too young. This Brother Mink suddenly attacked while Wang Ling was thinking of a way to deal with it. Wang Ling made what he thought was the right response. He sealed off his ear aperture so that the soundwave spell wouldn't disturb his thoughts. In fact, even if he didn't seal off his ear aperture, this soundwave spell wouldn't have much of an effect on Wang Ling, but he had to act. This was an act for San Yuan, who was outside. But just as Wang Ling thought that his acting was pretty good, this Brother Mink who looked like a rapper in front of him suddenly flung out several hidden weapons from his sleeves. Wang Ling's heart trembled, but there wasn't much to say about the hidden weapons. In order to complement the body skills, it was common for people to use hidden weapons to harass their opponents while they were moving, and it wasn't uncommon to use hidden weapons together. So it wasn't like Wang Ling didn't understand Brother Mink's behavior. But the problem was, when the hidden weapons flew over, Wang Ling was still dumbstruck, because these hidden weapons were dumpling skins. Chapter 11:21. Wang Ling had privately thought that this was just a simple simulation game, and hadn't expected that the master of each level would actually be a character with a meme. Take this Brother Martin for example. It was very obvious that the character's design had definitely been based on a certain rap singer. Furthermore, this singer had been extremely famous a while ago, and was the leader of the rap group Green Grass Association. As for the hidden weapon design of the dumpling skin, Wang Ling already had no way to ridicule it, because the main reason this character had become popular, and then spurned by everyone was because he had cuckolded his big brother and gotten together with his sister-in-law. As the saying went, dumplings were the most delicious and the most fun. At this point, Wang Ling already couldn't bear to think about it anymore. His heart was on the verge of collapse. This game was simply toxic. But if it had been a combination of a hidden weapon and the body fusion spell, Brother Martin would have been a lot less of a threat. Wang Ling had initially thought that Brother Martin would use a more advanced sound wave spell and the body fusion spell to attack, but it turned out that the second level wasn't too difficult. The difficulty increased gradually with each level, and Wang Ling could only blame himself for overthinking things. Wang Ling used his movement to avoid Brother Martin's dumpling skin. His mind and eye were one, and the king's eye's dynamic vision inadvertently played a huge role. As he avoided the hidden weapon, he actually managed to turn the dumpling skin back into his hand. Then he abruptly threw the dumpling skin again. It was as fast as a flywheel as it cut into Brother Martin's abdomen. Brother Martin fell to the ground in pain, and announced his defeat. If I could do it all over again. I want to tell big brother sister-in-law and I truly love each other. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. In his heart, he marveled at the realism of this game's design. Although there were huge flaws in the character designs and functions, the overall feeling of the characters was still reproduced. Wang Ling had always rejected the idea of a third party in a marriage. Fortunately, Father Wang had already proven himself to be a good family man through his actions. At the very least, he had never been careless when it came to buying things for Mother Wang. Take this pregnancy as an example. Father Wang knew that after the pregnancy preparations and Wang Wan's birth, the family would have a huge new expense. Thus, he had been updating his novels with special situations recently in order to earn some money for milk powder and diapers. Every day, he would write 20 or 20,000 yuan, turning himself into a tentacle monster. He was completely different from an author like Kuxuan, who had no integrity at all. Wang Ling didn't know why this Kuxuan guy had the face to write about Father Wang as his model. They weren't on the same level in terms of diligence alone. Today's training ended early, mainly because San Yuan realized that the students of number 60 high this year were too outstanding. That was all he had prepared for today. Physical skills training was originally planned for tomorrow, but after everyone had passed the test, San Yuan suddenly realized that he had nothing left to teach. In Headmaster Chen's office, San Yuan sat upright on the sofa. He still maintained his strict habits in the army, leaving only half of his buttocks on the sofa. At the same time, his back was very straight, and when he sat, he was also well-behaved, with his hands gently placed on his knees. Headmaster Chen made San Yuan a cup of tea. San Yuan turned a switch on the iron mask, and a straw stuck out from the center of the mask. Headmaster Chen was curious. "What kind of design is this, San Yuan?" "Sorry, I'm used to it in the army. This straw is specially made with a filter function, and is suitable for us to use when we're looking for water in the wild." Because he wore a mask all year round, San Yuan was already used to all kinds of uses for it. Even now he still wore it when he drank tea. Even when he ate, because of the poor swallowing technique, there was no need for him to take it off when he ate. The truth was that the masks which Magnificent Immortal had specially developed for Special Forces soldiers actually had many miraculous uses, which even Headmaster Chen was aware of. It wasn't unusual for ordinary masks to be able to filter and purify air. "San Yuan, you and I have been friends for many years. Tell me the truth. What do you think of our number 60 high students this time?" Headmaster Chen asked for San Yuan's opinion with great sincerity. He had invited San Yuan over because he knew that San Yuan would not be courteous to him. He was a straightforward man who spoke his mind, and was straightforward in both his words and actions. He was a straightforward person. Do you want to hear the truth? San Yuan looked at Headmaster Chen expressionlessly. Of course. Headmaster Chen smiled as he looked forward to San Yuan's comments. If San Yuan could find some problems before the national competition, then there would at least be hope for number 60 high to make it into the top 30 in the country. After all, there were 102 high schools this time, and there would be all kinds of demons and monsters. Being in the top 30 in the country was already very impressive, and Headmaster Chen didn't dare ask for a higher ranking at all. Top 10 would indeed be a little difficult for this bunch of kids. But setting a small target that was achievable was fine. However, San Yuan's answer was far beyond Headmaster Chen's expectations. San Yuan. They're all outstanding kids. At least from what I've seen in class today, I don't think there's much of a gap between their overall strength and that of the kids in the city key high schools. Their reactions are quick, their thinking is flexible, and they have an exceptional rapport. Rapport? Headmaster Chen was blank. Yes, they have a very good rapport. San Yuan said, the physical technique tests I gave them were all done in an independent mental space, which prevented them from spying on each other, cheating, and discussing strategies. But it was under these conditions that the transfer students and the senior students actually cooperated with each other exceptionally well. In particular, the spiritual bond between that classmate Wang Ling and the other transfer students has reached an inconceivable level. Headmaster Chen. San Yuan. Wang Ling is very quick-witted. After he cleared the test, the other transfer students cleared it almost at the same time, and they used the same method. If it wasn't for the fact that the mental space is independent, I suspect that their brain structure is the same. The same strategy can actually be produced by these children at the same time, under the same conditions. This kind of tacit cooperation is something I've never seen in my life. Headmaster Chen. San Yuan. If they can use this rapport in the competition, number 60 high's ranking this time should be very high. Headmaster Chen. What do you think? San Yuan. At least the top 8. Headmaster Chen wiped at his sweat. You're really daring. I'll be satisfied as long as we can make it to the top 30. San Yuan. There's nothing wrong with being a little confident. We even made it to the finals of FPX in League of Legends this year, so be a little more confident. Headmaster Chen. Chapter 11:22. If anyone else had said this, Headmaster Chen would probably just treat it as a joke. But since it was San Yuan who said it, he was still doubtful, but at the same time hopeful. If number 60 high really could make it to the top 8, he would probably wake up smiling even in his dreams. Your predictions have always been very accurate, but I also want to ask, which school do you think the champion will be? Devil Vanquishing High, Titan High, or South Sea Sky High? Headmaster Chen asked. These were the 3 schools that Headmaster Chen was more optimistic about. And they were also the 3 schools that he had told number 60 high's team to avoid as much as possible after entering the battlefield. Devil Vanquishing High was proficient in control studies. Titan High was unbreakable with powerful meat shields and power output, while South Sea Sky High had a powerful perception system. Individually, these 3 schools were particularly troublesome on the battlefield. If they could form an alliance in the competition this time, it would be very frightening. Thus, Headmaster Chen determined that even if the students from these 3 high schools didn't win the championship, they would at least be in the top 4. In addition, the schools themselves were relatively famous, and the students' combat strength had been very impressive in previous years. Titan High's basketball team had been number 1 in the country for a full 30 years in a row, and had never lost once. The main reason was that no one could keep an eye on the fearsome weight of this group of meat shield students. When they moved, each of them was like a moving aircraft carrier warship, and any team they encountered didn't even dare to make any small moves. If they tripped over someone and got crushed, they would be seriously injured. Hearing Headmaster Chen's words, San Yuan pondered it for a moment. To be honest, there were indeed a lot of famous and powerful enemies among the schools participating in the competition this time. Whether it was Devil Vanquishing High, Titan High or South Sea Sky High, they were indeed strong opponents for number 60 high. However, apart from these upper-level schools, some middle-level schools were also strong enemies, such as Sakura Sky High and League of Nations #1 high school. Of course, San Yuan didn't think that the most troublesome schools on the list weren't the ones mentioned above. He thought that Headmaster Chun had underestimated one of the middle-level schools, and that this school was very likely to be this year's champion. Headmaster Chun, do you know Balance Flame Middle School? At that moment, San Yuan raised his head and stared at Headmaster Chun. Balance Flame Middle School? Headmaster Chun hissed. This school did have a reputation, but because it was a middle-level school, Headmaster Chun hadn't put it on the list before. I know this school. Headmaster Chun said thoughtfully. Balance Flame Middle School is a completely enclosed cultivation school. All the students live in dormitories and only get 2 hours of sleep a day. The rest of the time is used for cultivation. They have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to practice their swordsmanship. And the meals prepared in the school cafeteria are all nutritional fasting pills. In my opinion, this kind of education method is extremely unscientific. But the enrollment rate for key universities in this school is 90%, and 90% of the students will eventually get into key cultivation universities. Even the worst students can get into second-tier universities, San Yuan said. This kind of closed education is indeed very powerful, but I still think it's not good for the students' physical and mental development. Headmaster Chun said, San Yuan, do you think this school can win the championship? I don't think so. Although these students were trained to be learning machines and fighting machines, it was easy for them to form habitual thinking and become too dogmatic after studying there. For such a large-scale national competition, it was very important to be flexible. Besides, the students participating this time are all grade 1 students. Balance Flame Middle School is strong in grade 3, but I don't think there's anything to fear about grade 1. Headmaster Chun, you're wrong. San Yuan shook his head. As far as I know, Balance Flame Middle School has its own set of rigid standards for enrollment, which is that students must have a certain amount of self-control and learning ability. Students who can learn may not end up doing very well in the exams, but students who can't learn will definitely not do as well as others unless they're possessed by the god of luck. These students have strong learning and research abilities, and they know how to use the knowledge they've learned in textbooks to integrate it into practical operations. Learning ability, huh? Headmaster Chun hadn't expected San Yuan to suddenly mention this. When students from Balance Flame Middle School enter the school, their first course is copying shells. Every student has a unique understanding of how to copy other people's strengths. Although this batch of high school students has only studied at Balance Flame Middle School for half a semester, if they're put on the battlefield and absorb the tactical thinking of powerful cultivation schools like Devil Subduing High School, Titan High School, and even South Sea Sky High School, as they slowly develop, they may eventually become terrifying big devils, San Yuan said. San Yuan's words might sound a little exaggerated, but Headmaster Chun knew very well that Balance Flame Middle School was such a school with freakish learning ability. If it wasn't for San Yuan's reminder, he would have forgotten about this. I remember that the current headmaster of Balance Flame Middle School is. There was a look of reminiscence on Headmaster Chen's face. Zuoqingqiu, San Yuan answered at once. Oh, so it's this kid. Headmaster Chen smiled. It was another familiar name. It seems that this Headmaster Zua is also an old acquaintance of Headmaster Chen's? San Yuan chuckled. Almost all the headmasters who had graduated from cultivation military schools with Headmaster Chen had been dominated by his powerful tactical thinking, including Li Qingxi, the headmaster of #1 Devil Subduing High School, and Zuoqingqiu, the headmaster of Balance Flame Middle School. Headmaster Chen had completely restrained them back then. He had used all kinds of supportive spells that caught them off guard, and they had suffered a lot. The headmasters of all the schools had to take command in the national competition this time. In the past, before Zuoqingqiu had become the headmaster of Balance Flame Middle School, Headmaster Chen would have had to weigh how to deal with this school. But now that Headmaster Chen knew that the headmaster of this school was Zuoqingqiu, he immediately beamed in his office. This Zuoqingqiu kid has always been a conservative. This might become a big taboo for him to command. Headmaster Chen drummed his fingers on the desk on his chair. After a moment of thought, he said, This time, Balance Flame Middle School has to be careful not to lose too many members in the early stages. In the middle and later stages of the competition, they might gain the upper hand by relying on their strong learning ability. San Yuan. What do you mean? Headmaster Chen flicked his fingers. In that case, why don't we focus our fire on this ticking time bomb from the very beginning? Chapter 1123. It had originally just been a district body technique exchange meet, but it had inexplicably developed into a national competition. If number 60 High won a place in the competition, Wang Ling probably wouldn't be able to remain invisible even if he wanted to. The way things were developing now, it seemed that Father and Mother Wang had already gone against the important strategy of keeping a low profile, which Father and Mother Wang had set down for him back then. Wednesday, November 12th. That night, Wang Ling brought a letter to inform the parents and 2 tickets. Because it had already been upgraded to a national competition, Songhai City's Education Commission had decided to reserve a venue for all the parents of students participating in the school to watch the competition offline. Naturally, Father and Mother Wang were also invited. However, this clown couple had never attended Wang Ling's parent-teacher conferences since junior high, and had always found someone else to go on their behalf. For example, in the first semester of senior grade 1, Wang Ling had gone to grenade throwing senior immortal. Thus Wang Ling felt that Father and Mother Wang really might not attend. Yo, this event is quite big, there are actually tickets. When Father Wang received the letter to inform the parents and the 2 tickets, he was instantly lost in thought. The school had already given out the tickets in advance. It was up to the parents whether they went or not. There wouldn't be anyone specifically supervising them, and there wouldn't be any teachers on site to see which parents came or didn't come. But the problem was that Father Wang actually didn't think that an event like the Body Technique Exchange meet wasn't good for the couple's prenatal education during this period of time. Recently, Father and Mother Wang had been carrying out careful prenatal education. Mother Wang had been walking around with her belly out, while Father Wang followed her around. They had visited all kinds of cultural museums related to the history of cultivation, and wanted to use the influence of art to calm Wang Wan down. Logically speaking, girls should be more gentle and quiet, but considering the situation after Wang Ling was born, Father and Mother Wang still felt that this kind of calming prenatal education was very important. Staring at the report and the tickets, Father Wang thought for a while, and finally decided to decline. How about you ask little Lei to go on our behalf? Wang Ling. He knew it. You might be quiet now and unwilling to talk, but the truth is that you were especially noisy when you were born. Your mom and I have always suspected that you didn't do a good job of prenatal education before you were born. These last few days, your mom and I have been taking your sister to see cultural art exhibitions. I just hope that your sister can be more gentle and quiet. Father Wang said, I don't think an event like a body technique exchange meet is good for prenatal education. What if your little sister is influenced to become violent? What should we do? Your mom and I can't beat you anymore. Wang Ling was horrified at these words. What do you mean I can't beat him anymore? From the moment he was born, he couldn't beat him at all. Most importantly, Wang Ling didn't think that this kind of gentle and quiet prenatal education would limit his little sister's strength. He had known earlier that Wang Wan's shadow Dao had already caused him enough trouble during the summer break. At that time, he had already determined that Wang Wan was a formidable opponent. Although his cute little sister hadn't been born yet, judging from how troublesome Shadow Dao was, his little sister wasn't someone to be trifled with. Seeing that Father Wang had no intention of going, Wang Ling put away the tickets for the venue and had Father Wang sign the notice. To be honest, Wang Ling felt a sense of relief that Father and Mother Wang weren't going. As a child, he always felt nervous at the thought of his parents watching his performance in the competition. That night, as Mother Wang applied a facial mask, she discussed the national competition with Father Wang. Actually, you really want to go and watch it, right? Father Wang stared at the newspaper in silence. It just so happens that I'm going shopping with a few sisters on the day of the competition. You don't have to worry about me. They've always taken good care of me, said Mother Wang. Father Wong put down the newspaper and sat up straight as he listened to Mother Wong. The national competition this time is very rare. Ling Ling, who usually keeps such a low profile, was chosen by the teacher, which proves that he's very popular with the teacher. It's actually a good idea for you to go and watch it. You and your son usually don't talk much, and you always try to talk to your son by deducting his pocket money to get closer to him. This is actually a very good opportunity. It's also good to watch Ling Ling's performance in the competition and get to know him better. But Ling Ling has already collected the tickets, right? Mother Wong smiled. She opened a drawer and took out the tickets. I got them from Ling Ling. Father Wong took the tickets, his heart trembling a little. You damned Sundara, Mother Wong commented. Do you think I want to? Father Wong pursed his lips. Father Wong really wanted to go and watch this body technique exchange meet. On one hand, as Mother Wong said, he really wanted to see how Ling Ling would perform. On the other hand, it was actually to gather material. Father Wong didn't have a lot of material for a body technique exchange meet. There were 102 high schools participating in the national competition this time. And Father Wong couldn't help but be tempted by this full library of material. Material came from life. One of Father Wong's main writing tasks was to collect news about the people around him and society, and integrate material into his novel to reflect the current era. For example, the incident between an online live streamer and a fruit farmer the day before yesterday had been written into his novel the next day. The fruit farmer incident had started when a fruit farmer had set up his shop online. Due to a mistake, he had set the price of 4,500 grams of oranges at 26 yuan to 4,500 kilograms at 26 yuan. This mistake had immediately attracted the attention of some so-called flea shearers online. An online live streamer, who was proud of fleecing people, made this mistake public in his fan group and appealed to his fans to place an order online. They were sure that the seller definitely wouldn't be able to deliver the goods, so they immediately filed a collective complaint in order to obtain 10% of the total payment as compensation. The poor fruit farmer had orders for tens of thousands of yuan overnight, and the store's deposit of more than 100,000 yuan was instantly wiped out. That online live streamer called passerby finally chose to apologize after being condemned by all the major netizens. His account was banned by the live streaming platform. Thus, these professional online flea shearers, who were hiding behind the scenes, officially entered the public eye. This was no longer fleece shearing, but chopping off the head of a sheep. Anyone would think that taking advantage of other people's mistakes for profit was extremely shameful. But when Father Wong looked at the source material, his first reaction was to consider whether it was reasonable to adapt it. As a cultivation author, it was a little abrupt for such a modern operation to appear in his own cultivation novel. Thus, in Father Wong's story, he had adapted this flea shearing story. Chapter 11:24. That night, Father Wong had a routine discussion with his Lai Mengmeng about how to set up his character. None of the characters in the novel were superfluous. Whether it was the main character or the antagonist, the main character or the supporting character, they all had their own wonderful stories and positions. Therefore, it was especially important to position the characters in the overall story. In the middle of the night, the two of them were on a video call. Recently, Lai Mengmeng had rarely dropped by to urge them for manuscripts. The main reason was that the website had recently been tightening up on censorship issues. This was the law of the environment, survival of the fittest, and the unfit would all be 404. It sounded cruel, but it was the truth. Therefore, recently, the entire literary website's EAL department had been working overtime to do manual censorship in order to prevent some authors' plots from violating the rules. If it was a minor violation, it was fine to have the chapters or keywords blocked. But if it was a serious violation, it was very likely that the entire book would be taken off the shelves. If it was a little more serious, it was possible that the author's pen name would be banned. After reviewing several thousand books today, Lai Mengmeng took the time to check the new characters with Father Wong. Fleecing, you're really up to date. I've also seen the news. It said that the online streamer is quite unconvinced, and says that the fruit farmers are creating hype. There's nothing to be unconvinced about. I have a piece of news here. It is said that this fruit farmer is targeted for poverty alleviation. The village had just helped him open an online store, but the next day, the website was shut down due to complaints. I heard that even the village chief was shocked. Lai Mingming was shocked. There's such a thing? However, this matter is too sensitive. It's impossible to just write it into the book. So I think we should focus on mocking that heartless streamer. Father Wang said. In terms of character design, this is roughly what I'm thinking. Now, the protagonist is about to run into an old enemy, who will send out a lackey to tangle with him. My ability is to reap wool. Continue. I haven't thought about the specifics of the ability yet. I'm just giving you a general idea. In any case, the main point was on this sheep shearing. The new villain's code name is Lu Run. He's related to Grandpa Lu, whom I've written about in the book. He's Grandpa Lu's grandson. He's proficient in the internet and inherited a fake coupon sharing system from Grandpa Lu. Father Wang said, this fake coupon system exploits people's greed for small gains and generates countless discount links to trick cultivators into clicking on them. As long as a cultivator clicks on them, a portion of their cultivation will be taken away. Then, all of them will gather on the system host. Isn't that a little too much? Anyway, our main character is invincible. There's always a way to deal with him. Father Wang said. As long as you click on the promotion link, your cultivation will automatically be sucked away, but if you continue to forward the promotion link, your cultivation will return to you. The more he shared, the more he would return. But at the same time, it also caused these fake promotional links to spread on a large scale all over the world, which caused a huge crisis. Hearing this, Lai Mingming couldn't help but take a deep breath. This kind of viral link spread reminded him of the fear of being dominated by the pink 60 discount links in his WeChat moments, especially on November 11th every year. This was obviously an event for Taobao, but pink 60 also came to join in the fun. All kinds of links appeared almost every day in the major chat groups. The scariest thing was that there would always be friends who would ask you to click on the link. One must know that haggling was already quite scary in normal times. Sure enough, the source material comes from life? Lai Mingming sighed at Father Wang's imagination. With such a viral spread, wouldn't this villain be very strong? That won't be the case. Father Wang said. Although a lot of people like to take advantage of others, this is based on the fact that there are advantages to be had and wool to be fleeced. If this link is fake, it will definitely be reported on a large scale by netizens. So the friend who posted the link will be caught by the cyber police the next day. It won't cause too much damage. There's actually this kind of operation? Lai Mingming wiped at his sweat. This kind of absurd humor was Father Wang's usual way of dealing with things. Sometimes, you didn't need to pay too much attention to rationality. If you were humorous and absurd enough, you could just treat it as a joke. This style also reminded Lai Mingming of a talk show actor called Luden. For example, the other party's recent debate on whether to save the cat or the famous painting in a burning museum had been very exciting. Thursday, November 13th. Tomorrow was the day they would set off for Jinghua City. In the morning, Headmaster Chen had given everyone round-trip plane tickets to Jinghua City. The entire process for the competition was to report to the designated base before Friday evening tomorrow. The competition would officially begin on Saturday, and everyone would participate in a body technique survival competition on 9 Dragon Mountain for 8 days. During the competition, you weren't allowed to take any magic treasures, talismans, food or daily necessities out of the competition. Just at the entrance, there would be numerous tests, and if anyone was found to have smuggled anything in, they would immediately be disqualified. After all, this was a national competition, and the rules seemed stricter than any other body technique exchange meet. But the truth was that there had been a deliberate loophole. In response to this loophole, Headmaster Chen had explained to everyone in the morning. In theory, taking anything out of the competition isn't allowed. But in fact, there will definitely be people who choose to take the risk out of desperation and sneak through. Can they sneak through? Most people who have this kind of idea are extremely confident in their own strength. Headmaster Chen said, The rules for the national competition this time are only for inspections. In other words, if you can sneak through the inspection and successfully take something in, it won't be considered cheating even if you use it generously during the competition. This will depend on the student's ability to deal with it. That's too difficult. Hirogwa said. I have an uncle who took part in a similar activity when he was a student. At that time, there was already a space identification device at the entrance. Storage rings, storage bags, and magic treasures with storage spaces like this could be detected with a light scan. It's impossible to take them in. Headmaster Chen also fell silent at this point. He knew that this was a loophole that the Alliance of 10,000 Schools had deliberately set up to test the students' ability to deal with it. So this time, this kind of smuggling could only be considered opportunistic and not cheating. Even the rules didn't apply to students as cheating. This time, the Alliance of 10,000 Schools had played a very good word game. They collectively called this kind of smuggling, at the entrance, a violation. The word violation sounded much more comfortable than cheating. Furthermore, even if they really did find out that someone was disqualified, there wouldn't be any record on the student's file. Although San Yuan had predicted that number 60 high would be in the top 8, Headmaster Chen still wanted to play it safe. Since the Alliance of 10,000 Schools had given him an opportunistic loophole, he naturally had no reason not to take advantage of it. Tianjin. Chapter 1125. Under permissible circumstances, making use of loopholes in the rules was also a shortcut to obtaining a higher ranking in this competition. Headmaster Chen knew his old acquaintances too well. His heart was as clear as a mirror, and he knew that this group of people would definitely miss this opportunity. Li Qingxi, the headmaster of number 1 Devil Subduing High School, and Zhua Qingqiu, the headmaster of Balance Flame Middle School, were probably making corresponding plans at that moment. Of all the headmasters this time, Headmaster Chen thought that these two were his biggest enemies. Although they had both been defeated by him and didn't seem to be a threat, they wouldn't be able to support these two key city-level high schools if they didn't have some skills. Number 1 Devil Subduing High School was good at control spells, and the students of Balance Flame Middle School were very good at learning. Together, these two schools seemed to be a powerful combination. Number 1 Devil Subduing High School was good at control spells, and since they were good at control spells, they could control people or objects. Headmaster Chen could imagine using control spells to confuse the equipment used for the entrance test and cause it to make a false judgment. Given Li Qingxi's personality, he would definitely make his students do that. Even if they could bring one more fasting pill into the 8-day survival battle, their chances of winning would be greatly improved. Compared with Li Qingxi's side, the students of Balance Flame Middle School were more conservative. They were a bunch of bookworms who were overly particular about rules and dogma, and finding loopholes was absolutely unthinkable in their eyes. Headmasters wanted to persuade his students to bring the goods in, but he was also faced with the difficulty of the students being unwilling to break the rules. As headmaster, he couldn't force the students to do what he wanted. Headmaster Chen speculated that this headmasters would probably choose 1 or 2 students and use some tricks of his own to trick them into bringing the goods in. Headmaster Chen speculated that this headmasters would probably choose 1 or 2 students and use some tricks of his own to trick them into bringing the goods in. Humans could never escape the law of truth. Thus, Headmaster Chen's plan for Balance Flame Middle School was very simple. After everyone heard Headmaster Chen's plan, the corners of Dopigua's mouth twitched. Report. Report. Is that really okay? Isn't that shameless? It's just a reasonable way to compete, Headmaster Chen said. Balance Flame Middle School was a school that would be difficult to deal with in the later stages. They absolutely couldn't be allowed to survive the battle, so they had to be dealt with in the early stages as much as possible. If they could reduce the number of students right from the start, it would be good news for all the schools. Headmaster Chen had devised a strategy for this. As for how number 60 high would bring the magic treasures inside, he had already thought of this. Perhaps he could use Lotus Sun's mysterious sea to achieve this. Everyone knew that Lotus Sun's spirit sword had already awakened a sword spirit. As long as she used the characteristics of a sword spirit to hide it in the sword spirit space, it would be impossible for the equipment to detect it. Although spirit swords couldn't be brought into the National Physical Technique competition this time, if the sword spirit and the sword master were compatible enough, they could open up a sword spirit space remotely. Mysterious C has been with student Lotus Sun since she was born. In terms of compatibility, none of the students here should be as good as Lotus Sunday. That's why I'll have to trouble you with this operation. Yes, Headmaster. Lotus Sun readily agreed. As a delicate girl, even if Headmaster Chen hadn't said anything, Lotus Sun had in fact already thought of this method. She didn't just have to bring magic treasures, but also a lot of daily necessities. An 8-day battle for survival would definitely make one very sloppy, but Lotus Sun didn't want that to happen. This was a national competition, and there would always be footage of her entering the competition. She had to pay particular attention to her image. Otherwise she would bring shame to her Huagua water curtain group. Thus, she had to bring talismans for cleaning, as well as cosmetics for the girls. If conditions permitted, it would be best if she could wash and change her hair once a day. After class, everyone began to discuss what to bring. Li Yue asked, "Will we really not be discovered?" Lotus Sun nodded with a smile on her face. "We won't be discovered. It's very difficult to form a sword spirit space, and I was lucky enough to cultivate it. Generally, very few students at the foundation establishment stage can open up a sword spirit space, so it's unlikely that the inspection will specifically focus on a spirit sword space, as that would be too cumbersome. I don't know how long it would take to inspect over 1,000 students." Li Yue breathed a sigh of relief. "That's great. I was wondering what I would do if I was covered in dirt during these 8 days. Can you help me bring some cosmetics and toiletries?" Lotus Sun. "I'll prepare a few more, just use mine." Lu Qingyi also echoed, "Me too." Lotus Sun nodded graciously. "No problem. Super Chen, but what if—" "You shut up." The 3 girls berated him at the same time, stopping him. The power of this blessed mouth really couldn't be underestimated. In fact, Lu Qingyi also had a way to bring things in, but the problem was that she had no money at the moment. The money she earned from working at Wei Ji's house was only enough to buy some cheap cosmetics. Life was really too hard, so it would be good to freeload a little and save some money. Wang Ling realized that girls' train of thought was surprisingly consistent when it came to a battle for survival. Their first concern wasn't whether they could survive, but their appearance, which was a little too realistic. Hirogwa couldn't help sighing at this scene. "This is a battle for survival. Can you be a little more serious? For a girl, is there anything more important than being pretty and clean?" Li Yue smiled and looked at Lotus Sunday. "Ah, that's right, Rongrong, I have a set of kitchenware here. Bring it in for me later. There are a lot of local specialties on 9 Dragon Mountain. If I can gather good ingredients, I can make a picnic for everyone." "Knives? No problem, my sword spirit space is pretty big. It can probably fit in 2 trunks." Lotus Sun nodded in agreement. "Then can you help me bring a game console in?" Hirogwa asked. "You're the one who's going on a vacation." "I was going to stay at home and play Death Stranding next week, but who knew I'd be sent out for a competition?" "Don't worry, I'll only play when it's absolutely safe. As long as I can bring it in, I'll do anything." "Where's your integrity?" Lotus Sun sweated in her heart, then turned to the others. "Is there anything else you want to bring? I have a lot of space here." After saying that, she turned to look at Wang Ling. "Wang Ling. Lotus Sun. Classmate Wang Ling, do you want crispy noodle snacks?" Wang Ling. "That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."